Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Here to bring in part 22 of What If Sonic and his friends were in Remnant. Link down description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here YouTube. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 47, Prelude to the Show. The Glass Unicorn, once a highly pristine hotel in Atlas, was now little more than an empty warehouse. Ever since the owner and her daughters were mysteriously killed years ago, the place became a hotbed of controversy, so much so that the widowed husband of the late owner had to shut it down. And unfortunately, nobody seemed interested in buying it due to said controversy, so the exterior of the building essentially gathered dust. The inside, however, now served as the base for the widowed husband and his network of criminal activity. And that man's name was Amancio Glass, a middle-aged overweight man, slick, light brown hair and a mustache, copper-colored eyes, and tan skin. His attire consisted of a black business suit with a white collar shirt and bright yellow tie, a pair of black glasses over his eyes, and an overcoat over his shoulders. He currently sat in his personal office within the deep confines of the hotel, across from his two associates, the other heads of the Silver Bullet Brotherhood, Jacques Schnee and Fort Lee, this meeting taking place just 2 days after the collapse of the Schnee Dust Company mine. A third chair had also been set up for this meeting, set in between Jacques and Fort, and the man who sat in it was none other than Arthur Watts. I've seen a lot of things that others would find hard to believe, but a dead man standing before me. Amancio gestured to the reportedly deceased scientist in front of him. That's a new one. Amancio Glass. We've never had the pleasure of meeting, but I know all about you. Watts greeted pleasantly. The top-tier crime lord in the entire Atlas Kingdom. Guilty as charged. Amancio crossed his arms with pride. Even Ironwood and his ace ops couldn't touch me if they wanted to. They might not, Amancio, but it seems our world, Atlas included, has become invaded by those who would indeed challenge us. Jacques said. You're referring to this so-called golden hero? Amancio asked. And others. Fort added. I've seen at least 3 here in Atlas with my own eyes. And according to my daughter, they possess skills that could match that of professional huntsmen. Surpass, even, Watts said, surprising the 3 men present. As much as I hate to admit it, I've seen these creatures clear droves of the Grim with little issue. And despite any rumors surrounding Vale, I can at least confirm that Kingdom is now completely free of the Grim. So, it is true. Amancio muttered as his calm and confident facade faded slightly. Like everyone else on Remnant, Amancio saw the broadcasted attack on Beacon Academy, and the Golden Hero clearing away all the invading forces, robot and Grim alike. At first, he thought it was propaganda and tried to spin any news stations he owned as such, but it would seem that it was indeed a reality. A being out there exists with the ability to wipe away the Grim from an entire continent. Not only that, it seems he's become an influential figure in all of Remnant, especially the Faunus. Jacques revealed. I've seen several of my own staff watching videos of the Golden Hero's debut repeatedly, many of them smiling and laughing. You should clear out those animals from your mansion, Jacques. Fort advised with a hard face. Those beasts may seem harmless now, but now that they have a figure to rally behind, how long before they take away from you what they take away from me? And if they manage to get Ironwood on their side, as if Amancio wasn't nervous already. That kind of power backing up the general, and his empire will fold like paper. Worry not, gentlemen, Jacques quickly assured. I have managed to acquire a rather powerful ally who will be more than happy to commit his resources to us. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the communications device given to him by a certain mad scientist, and showed off the insignia for the Eggman Empire on the bottom. Fort and Amancio both looked in surprise. You're with that Dr. Eggman? The latter questioned. The same maniac who sided with the White Fang. The White Fang was merely an instrument, test subjects if you will, to see if those animals could utilize the technology we have to offer. Watts quickly said. While Arthur wasn't exactly bigoted towards the Faunus in general, but he could spin his words a bit if it means getting the rest of the Silver Bullet Brotherhood on his side. Still though, Fort looked unconvinced. The Vale branch of the White Fang was wiped out completely in the attack on Beacon. Watts said. And we are currently working with the Spider organization in Mistral to tear down the remnants in that region as well. Spider, that organization has as much reach and power in Mistral as we do here in Atlas. Amancio said. And if you recall correctly, Mantle and Mistral were allies during the Great War decades ago. Jacques put in. Perhaps it's time to re-amend that little alliance. We've also been reaching out to contacts in Vacuo to see what we can get from there. Watts added. I know how that region may seem dried of anything useful, at least as far as dust is concerned, but any resource in our hands is far preferable than to have it fall into the hands of the enemy. That enemy being the Golden Hero. Fort saw where they were going with this. And just what exactly can we do against such godly power? By stealing that power for ourselves. Watts said with a smile, further shocking Fort and Amancio. The Golden Hero's ability to do what he did in Vale is not exclusive to him, it's been scattered across all of Remnant. Our associate, Dr. Eggman, and other allies of ours, are currently seeking that power for ourselves. And if we were able to obtain it, we could finally have the means to rid Remnant of those animals entirely. Fort smirked. Among other things, gentlemen. Jacques chuckled. We have the chance to be more than just the businessmen that we are, confined only to Atlas and constantly looking over our shoulder to keep Ironwood and the huntsmen at bay. This time, they will bow to us. Amancio grinned at that. All right, that sounds like something we can rally behind. Very well then, Doctor. He stood up, prompting everyone else to do so as he extended his hands to Watts. Whatever resources you want here in Atlas, the Silver Bullet Brotherhood will contribute. Watts grinned as he shook Amancio's hand. Welcome to the fold. After a few lengthy hours of discussion, Watts and Jacques both rode in the limousine that Fort had arranged for the pair as it made its way through the nightly city of Atlas and back towards the Schnee mansion. Well, I'd say that meeting went rather well. The patriarch of the Schnee family commented as he had a glass of whiskey and offered another one to Watts, which he accepted. Yes. Offer your supposed partners what they want. Give proof you have what they want, and they will do anything you ask. The disgraced Atlesian doctor said. I knew you were a brilliant scientist, Arthur. But I never imagined you were such a good salesman. Jacques complimented. That being said, we can't afford to celebrate just yet. Watts got serious. We've only just started laying the groundwork. Should Ironwood, that infernal rodent, or any of their allies discover our presence so quickly, it could all fall apart. The Silver Bullet Brotherhood has remained well hidden since the late General Lagoon founded it. Jacques began with confidence, abducting and selling Faunus to the highest bidder in various lands, silencing anyone who dares to speak up for their rights, and with Glass, vast network in the criminal underworld, combined with Lee's technological gifts and my resources, we should be just fine, especially with Dr. Eggman backing us up. And yet, the Grimm have been on Remnant significantly longer than any human-made organization. And Sonic wiped it all out just like that. Watts snapped his fingers for emphasis. But he doesn't have access to that power yet. Jacques pointed out. The keyword there being, yet. Arthur said. We can't afford to get reckless here. That blue rodent could wipe away everything we've spent years building in the blink of an eye. That, and we still have an unknown factor here in Atlas. You mean the one responsible for the recent mine collapse earlier this week? Jacques asked. You're certain neither Glass nor Lee had anything to do with it? Watts narrowed his eyes. As heads of the Brotherhood, we've agreed to a non-aggression pact of not violating with any of our respective businesses. Jacques replied. It lowers the risk of infighting. As well as makes it easier to cut the others off should they be caught. Watts replied. That being said, somebody else is here in Atlas making their own moves. And at the moment, we can't be certain as to what their objective is, whether they'd be a potential ally or enemy. Suddenly, a bright orange glow could be seen from outside their windows, much to their surprise. And just then, the entire vehicle shook as Jacques was knocked off his seat while Arthur braced his hands to his seat to keep himself from sliding off. Driver, what is going on out there? Jacques demanded as he sat back up. But he got no response from the person up front. What in blazes? The man was about to open the door and see what was going on himself, but the second he did, a gloved hand was aimed directly into his face. And as it was, a swirl of energy flowed out from the fingertips and spun in front of his eyes. Jacques couldn't help but follow the trail of spinning energy, and as he did, he felt his mind grow weak. Any worries he had vanished, as had any other emotion or thought to his own self. Sleep. With that one word, Jacques fell flat on the cold metal ground of the new location the limousine had just appeared in, with the driver of said limo right next to him on the ground. Watts immediately reached into his coat and pulled out his personal firearm, a 20-shot, double-barrel revolver. But as his arm extended forward, it entered a small orange portal that appeared in front of his face. Before he could react, he felt something snatch the gun from his hand before he pulled his hand back as the small portal closed in front of him. Interesting. He then climbed out of the limo to see a certain white-furred platypus holding his revolver in his hands. A rather archaic design, yet it seems to have advanced mechanisms within. A rather clever and deceitful design choice. The platypus said with a smirk. Before Watts could even act, a pair of guns cocked at his sides, revealing themselves to be a pair of egg pawns, each armed with a gun as they appeared to surround him. That's when Watts noticed his surroundings. No longer were they in the empty back streets of Atlas on their way to the Schnee manor. Now they appeared to be in some old frozen factory, one that was different from any Atlasian or any kind of remnant design. "Ah, Dr. Arthur Watts, I presume." The platypus greeted with a smile and a bow. "I apologize for the sudden intrusion, but I felt it was time for us to meet face to face. I am Dr. Starline. You know me." Watts got a good look at the platypus in front of him. This creature was clearly from Sonic's world, bearing a similar anthropomorphic animalistic appearance to the blue rodent and his companions. "I know that you are presumed deceased among the kingdom of Atlas and the rest of the world of Remnant." Starline began with a grin. "I also know that you are currently aligned with the grim witch named Salem, as well as Dr. Eggman, seeking to find the Chaos Emeralds scattered across your world before Sonic the Hedgehog can. And I would like to provide my services to aid you in this endeavor." Watts looked at Starline seriously. "Funny, Robotnik made no mention of you." "Oh, he is not yet aware of my presence." Starline replied. "If you wish to ally with someone as grand and spectacular as the good doctor, you would need more than just half measures. Such as your attempts to rally the Silver Bullet Brotherhood to your cause. While they are certainly useful, they lack the facilities needed to utilize certain resources you have, at least in comparison to Ironwood and his military. And you believe you can provide me with those resources?" Watts asked. "More than you can imagine." Starline smirked as he opened a portal to his side and reached into it. "Such as this." He pulled out his hand from the portal to reveal the Cyan Chaos Emerald, which took Watts by surprise. "Ah, I see I have your attention. If you would like to know more, then perhaps we can strike a deal." "What sort of deal?" Watts questioned as he noticed the portal closing as well as the glowing orange gemstone attached to Starline's glove. It looked different from the Chaos Emeralds, and yet it also seemed to be the source of these portals this Starline was creating. But he suspected there was more to this gemstone than simply portal making. "I have a plan to dismantle Atlas and remake it into a kingdom worthy of Dr. Eggman's rule." Starline began. "If we combine our plans, we'll be that much closer to locating the remaining emeralds and taking control of this kingdom. You can have full access to this base and all the resources within, and I'll give full support to the plans you and the Brotherhood came up with in that meeting of yours." And in exchange, Watts raised an eyebrow. "You make no mention of me to either Dr. Eggman or Salem." Starline answered. "I plan to present myself to the former soon, but I'd much rather do it on my own terms. And I'd be more than happy to share with you the details of that particular plan." "That is all?" Watts asked, trying to sound genuinely surprised at what seemed like an easygoing offer. "That is all," Starline confirmed. "I know all about you, Arthur Watts. A brilliant mind for sure, but with a far greater ego to match. You could never reach the same level the doctor is at. But your experience and knowledge of Atlas would make you invaluable. Not to mention that unlike the rest of that witch's minions, you have no loyalty to her at all. So, I'll butter you up, convince you to truly commit to the Eggman Empire and help dispose of Salem. But should you prove to be a threat to the doctor, I won't hesitate to drop you into the mouth of an active volcano." Does he take me for a fool? Watts thought to himself. He's planning on using me to curry favor with Eggman. Why anyone would want to work for that bloated buffoon is beyond me. Still, I've never seen a base like this in Atlas before, and I doubt he was lying about providing me resources, among which is Merlot's mutagen that I have yet to mass produce. It's clear from the Chaos Emerald that he is our unknown player, but if he were actually smart, he would have remained hidden. He wouldn't have gone to all this trouble if he didn't need me. But I certainly can't risk doing anything rash. That gemstone he used to transport me here can easily be used to expose me to Ironwood and ruin all my plans. I'll play along for now, see how you can be useful to me, and maybe try to find a way to seize your resources for myself. Starline, was it? I feel like we're going to get along just fine. Watts said as he and his new associate shook hands. Indeed. Shall we get started then, partner? Starline chuckled. What is it one would expect from a forest in the middle of winter? Barren trees without a single leaf. Check. Snow falling from the darkened sky and blanketing the ground. Check. Not a single color other than white and black. Check. A pack of beowulfs all charging at a single target that stood out in the middle of all this white and black. That certainly was the case now. And that target they were seeking stood out like a sore thumb. In the cold and barren landscape in white and black was a figure clad in bright red with a hood over their face, unable to be seen by anyone unless they got a closer look. As this figure stepped into a clearing, they soon found themselves surrounded by the pack of beowulfs from all sides. The three at the front of the pack leapt at the red-clad figure first, only for said figure to disappear in a burst of rose petals and later appeared above the whole pack, her form being revealed in the light of the full moon as none other than Ruby Rose herself. Reaching to her back, Ruby drew her beloved weapon, Crescent Rose, in its gun form, and fired, blasting the head clean off one beowulf before landing as the others charged. She shot and fired her weapon close-ranged at the back of a beowulf's skull before leaping to another to shoot off its side. She flipped and rolled to fire and shoot down a fourth beowulf before standing up straight and unfurling her weapon into its scythe mode. Ruby let the next beowulf charge before she swung Crescent Rose to catch the Grim by its neck. With a slight smirk, Ruby pulled on her blade while also firing another shot to completely cut the beowulf in half. And as the Grim faded away, Ruby looked past its disintegrating corpse to see a wave of badniks, specifically egg gunners, egg fighters, and egg pawns, all of whom were charging at her. Never one to back down from a challenge, Ruby used her semblance to burst forward at the wave of killer robots, dashing past all their gunfire, slicing and firing Crescent Rose to shoot and cut down any that stood in her way. She came to the face of one egg fighter and shot its head off with Crescent Rose before moving past it to swing her scythe and cut an egg gunner in half before spinning her weapon over her head rapidly to slice apart the egg pawns and egg fighters that came her way like a blender. Once they were cut down, the remaining egg gunners appeared to circle her from all directions as they opened fire with their guns, but Ruby used her semblance to dash straight up into the air and avoid the bullets. While airborne, Ruby fired her Crescent Rose in a perfect circle to shoot down the last of the badniks before landing in the middle of the snow with an excited smile on her face. Alright, score 1 for Team RWBY. She held her weapon in the air, but when she looked up, she blinked in surprise to see that Crescent Rose was no longer in her hands. But rather, something else entirely. It was a black and gold axe-like weapon with a long handle and a trigger attached to the end. What? Ruby looked in confusion, especially as she looked to what she thought was her own reflection in the blade of the axe. But it wasn't her reflection she was seeing, it was a woman who looked similar to her, only much older. Who are? Despite the resemblance, Ruby for some reason, couldn't recognize the face of the woman who was staring back at her. Not only that, the woman appeared to have a look of disappointment in her face. A large explosion erupted behind her, causing her to turn around and gasp at something that made her look in shock. It was a giant flying battleship, one resembling a giant eagle that had the emblem of the Eggman Empire on it. And from its deck, Nevermores and Griffins rained down onto the forest as a large fire began to spread everywhere. Ruby immediately dashed through the forest, carrying the axe with her, but even with her semblance, she felt herself being slowed down immensely. Up to the point where she could barely run at her usual speed. Glancing back, Ruby found a rather large sword sheathed to her back. A sword belonging to someone she truly admired and let her use after. The minute those thoughts came to her, the whole forest around her was set ablaze as all the snow-covered trees burned around her. But Ruby pressed on, moving headlong into the fire, despite still carrying the sword and the axe with her. It took all her willpower, but she appeared to come through the burning woods and into a clearing. Once there, the girl's eyes widened in terror at what she saw. It was Beacon Academy, lying in burning ruins. All the buildings, including the giant clock tower, were blown away as the battleship from above continued to rain down bombs, while the flying Grim also flew in around to smash through the remains of the campus. RWBY tried to step forward, to see if there was some way she could help, only to feel a hand reach out from the ground and grab her ankle, causing her to trip. Turning around, RWBY's face turned pale as she saw Yang emerging from the ground, her skin pale and cold, her eyes completely black and missing. "Where were you, RWBY?" Yang questioned in a dry and hollow tone. More hands emerged from the ground around her and grabbed her in every direction. Those that came out from the ground were revealed to be Weiss, Tails, Blake, Knuckles, John, Amy, Pyrrha, Ren, Rouge, Nora, even Kiro. Like her own sister, all of them had pale skin and blackened eyes. "We needed you," Weiss moaned. "You abandoned us," Blake moaned. "You did this," Amy moaned. No, RWBY tried as she felt herself being overwhelmed by these sudden emotions and her deceased friends. I can make this right, we can fix this." "Nothing to fix," John moaned. "You're broken," Nora moaned. "False Huntress," Knuckles moaned. "False hero," Pyrrha moaned. "This is all your fault," Ren moaned. "No, please," RWBY cried as every single one of them grabbed her from all directions, preventing her from escaping. "Sonic would be disappointed in you," Tails moaned. "Your mother would be disappointed in you," Kiro moaned. That hit RWBY hard. Sonic, her mom, she looked back to the weapons she still had, the axe and the sword. One had the face of the woman from before still looking at her disappointment, while the other now had the face of the blue hedgehog in its blade as he had the same look as well. Those looks of disappointment struck her to her core and she no longer felt the strength to keep going. Even as the hollowed-out forms of her friends began to pull her into the ground with her. RWBY. As she was pulled under, RWBY turned straight forward to see Penny, her head being held by one hand of Metal Sonic, while the blade of her crescent rose was brought to her neck, her own weapon now being wielded by the killer robot. "Help me." The girl's silver eyes met the tearful green-eyed gaze of her friend, only to look past to see the blood-red gaze of Metal Sonic as a fanged grim-like grin appeared on Metal's own face before he sliced Crescent Rose and cut Penny's head clean off. "No, no, no," RWBY cried as she was finally dragged and submerged into the ground completely. "No." RWBY shot up from her bead with a slight shriek. The girl felt her own heart as she took a moment to collect herself, looking around to make sure that everything was alright. "Where am I?" She looked around at the hotel room she shared with her sister, who was currently asleep on the bed next to her. "Right, we're still in Argus." Looking out the window on the side as well as the clock on the wall, RWBY could tell it was still early in the morning, but the sun should be rising soon. Might as well get outside and get some exercise while she was up. The girl got up to quickly and quietly get dressed, making sure not to wake up and bother her sister again. Yang was a heavy sleeper, but she still didn't want to take any chances. RWBY then reached for the sheathed caliburn in the corner of the room but hesitated for a moment before touching it. A heavy look appeared on her face as she saw the sword Sonic had lent her, to serve as a substitute for her missing Crescent Rose, the same weapon that she made with her own two hands, that Metal Sonic had used too. RWBY shook her head to keep that memory from coming back to the surface as she forced herself to grab her sword and quietly left the room, all without waking her sister. But as she left, she once again felt that odd crick in the back of her neck that she'd been having these past few weeks, almost a month now, and it hadn't gotten any better. If anything, it was getting worse. "Forget it. It's just a little cramp," she told herself. "A huntress has to push past this sort of thing. Don't ask for help for something so minor. Weiss or even Shadow would probably scold me for considering it anyway." RWBY had returned to the outdoor training field in the park and began practicing with her newly developed kicking fighting style to get a hang of it, as well as take her mind of things. She could deliver powerful kicks by charging, or even utilize tools around her like caliburn, poles, or tree branches to spin herself around before launching herself for the same effect. But that's about all she could do. Now she was seeing if she could practice rapid kicks, like how Yang could throw several punches at once, but that was hard to do since you still need your legs to stand. RWBY tried to balance on her left foot and kick several times with her right foot, striking a training dummy a few times before nearly losing her balance, forcing her to stop and stand straight. Nobody said this was gonna be easy. She muttered to herself while wiping the sweat from her brow. How long had they been in Argus again? 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since that whole mess with Cordovan and the Babylon rogues. And honestly, RWBY still couldn't believe those thieves made it out with the Chaos Emerald, and especially how Cordovan had planned on taking the emerald to Atlas behind all their backs just for the credit. They were all supposed to be on the same side, for crying out loud. And as if that wasn't bad enough, her whole party nearly took the blame for Cordovan's death at the hands of Raven. And the resulting commotion had drawn in several Grimm from the surrounding mountains, though RWBY, Sonic, and their friends, including Sienna, were able to work with the military to push the monsters back. Fortunately, whatever the Babylon rogues did to shut down all communications within the city was only temporary, and the relay was undamaged, meaning they were able to contact Ironwood less than an hour after the battle, and he was able to order the military stationed in the city to stand down before. They called Lionheart as well and explained the situation to both headmasters, and neither were pleased, especially Ironwood, who was furious that his own officers had gone behind his back, but even more so with Cordovan's death meant that Argus had no leader. Lionheart volunteered to look after Argus while the huntsmen at Haven, particularly she and Zayden, kept watch over Haven Academy. Ironwood would be sending a replacement to take over Argus soon. And with all the huntsmen called back to Mistral, RWBY and the others decided to stay in Argus and help keep an eye on things here. While she, Young, Knuckles, and Amy helped the military. Sonic took Sienna and Rosa to check on the Wisps at Mystic Ruins, as well as Tangle at Spiral Hill Village, and begin rallying the Faunus villages throughout the continent against the rise in Grimm activity. They also got a call in from Blake and the Chaotix about Menagerie offering their support in the coming battle against Eggman and Salem, as well as the retrieval of the Chaos Emerald on that island nation, which was good news. RWBY could tell that Yang was particularly happy to hear that. Good. Yang needed to hear some good news after what happened with Raven. There was no mistake what they saw. Raven Bronwyn, Yang's biological mother and Kiro's sister, had been working with the Babylon rogues and killed Cordovan to steal the Chaos Emerald. And RWBY could tell how her sister was not happy about that. And RWBY was especially angry with Raven too. She killed somebody who could no longer fight back and stole a gemstone that could decide the fate of Remnant. At first RWBY would be willing to consider hearing Raven's side of the story after the woman helped them out at Beacon and Merlot's Island, but now she was really starting to understand why Kiro hated her so much. It made RWBY wonder what her father ever saw in her to begin with, or why her mother saw her as a friend. Mom. Once again, the thought of RWBY's own mother, Summer Rose, made her stop everything as she thought deeply about the same woman who gave birth to her and left and never came back. She left almost like Raven did, and yet it seemed like Kiro and her dad still had no resentment towards that. Maybe it was because she left out of a duty as a huntress. But was that a duty of a huntress? To leave family behind for the sake of the world? Once more, she thought about the words Sienna Khan said before, about huntsmen and huntresses taking the job to earn money. And while it was one thing to do so to provide for one's family, it was another to do so just for the sake of money, or even putting yourself under the control of somebody else with no real freedom. But was that really what it meant to be a huntsman? To follow orders like a soldier? It seemed that way for anyone in Ozpin's group, as Kiro seemed willing to follow the man's orders with little question. She thought she knew what it meant to be a huntress before, saving people and fighting monsters. But now, she wasn't so sure. If you're going to just stand there, you'll catch cold. Turning around, RWBY looked in surprise to see a middle-aged woman with red hair and green eyes and glasses approach her, 2 cups of coffee in her hand. The woman's hair and eye color were so familiar to RWBY that she almost said the name of a certain friend she knew. Pyrrha, would you like some coffee? The woman offered one of her cups to RWBY. I bought an extra. That's when RWBY suddenly felt the chill in the air. It was still early in the morning, just as the sun was coming up, and they were rather up north. So some nice hot coffee certainly sounded nice. After taking a cup, RWBY sat down on a nearby bench to rest and drink. Ah, thank you, Ms. Oh, pardon me, I should have introduced myself. My name is Penelope Nikos. The woman introduced. Nikos, RWBY repeated, and that's when the girl remembered something. Something her friend Pyrrha said when they all spoke last via long-distance call regarding Argus. You're Pyrrha's mother. The woman smiled as she sat down next to RWBY. And you must be RWBY Rose. The girl gasped in surprise. Pyrrha told me all about the friends she made at Beacon, her own teammates, including that boy she has a crush on, and this other team she had befriended at initiation, Team RWBY, I believe it was. So Pyrrha wrote to her mother the same way RWBY did with her dad. "What are you doing out so early?" Penelope asked. "It's still cold outside, not supposed to warm up till mid-afternoon." RWBY didn't know what to say at first. I just needed some fresh air, and some exercise to clear my head. "Pardon me if this sounds presumptuous, but you look as though you have something weighing on you, young lady," Penelope said. "If you want, I'd be willing to listen. But if not, it's fine." The woman looked at RWBY with a gentle and understanding smile, the same sort of smile she would see on her own father, one of patience. It was clear that she wanted to help in some way, but was also willing to respect another's boundaries if needed. Very similar to Pyrrha herself. Like mother, like daughter, it would seem. "I thought I had things figured out," RWBY began. "But, so much has happened recently and, I'm starting to wonder if I really knew anything at all. People I knew have made choices I didn't think they'd make, and some choices in front of me don't seem as clear-cut as I thought they were. When we're young, we always try to see things in black and white," Penelope said. "And sometimes, even as adults, there are still choices that are clearly right and wrong. But we also begin to see that maybe the world is a lot grayer than we thought, or how we'd like. I thought I knew what it meant to be a huntress," RWBY began. "They protect people. It seemed so easy to understand that I didn't really need to be told anything else. But, it seems like some people just use that power just to get what they want, no regard to the people around them, or even those that care about them." She felt she had to say some of this but also tried to omit specific details. She didn't want to drag this innocent woman into any of their problems. Penelope looked at RWBY with sympathy before looking out toward the direction of the sea. "Did Pyrrha ever mention anything about her father?" The young girl looked at the woman in confusion. "No, but I didn't exactly ask. His name was Ulysses, and he was a huntsman," Penelope began, the last part catching RWBY's attention. "He wasn't particularly famous, but he was a great man. He always fought for the people around him and was a master tactician as well." She smiled reminiscently before it faded slightly. "But when I carried Pyrrha, he left on a mission out to the sea, to protect an envoy of Faunus refugees fleeing to Menagerie. But they were attacked by a leviathan, and none of them survived." RWBY gave a slight gasp at that. "I had Pyrrha not long after that and raised her on my own," Penelope said. "I would sometimes tell her stories of her father, and maybe those motivated her to be a huntress too, though I don't know if that was the sole motivation as she just had this desire to help anyone in need, whether it be a fight or just personal troubles. I'd like to think that she inherited her father's spirit." I'm so sorry," RWBY said with sympathy, causing Penelope to smile as she put an understanding hand on the girl's shoulder. "My mom was the same thing. She left on a mission when I was little and never came back. My dad raised me and my sister and told us stories of her, and they motivated me to become a huntress too. But I only learned recently that he didn't want either of us to become huntresses. Is it wrong to think that, though?" "Of course it's not wrong," Penelope said. "It's only natural that you don't want your loved ones to get hurt." "But what about the people who can't defend themselves?" RWBY questioned. "Not everyone on Remnant is a huntsman. And not every person is good either, there are plenty of bad people out there. Somebody has to do something. And that's exactly what my husband said," Penelope replied as RWBY paid attention. "He knew the job was dangerous and that every time he went out, there was always a chance he wouldn't make it back. But if he could make the world even a little bit softer for me and our soon-to-be-born child, he would do just that. He'd cross the seas of the world and back for our sake. In the end, huntsmen and huntresses are people too, just like everyone else. We all take risks and make mistakes, and we're all vulnerable in more ways than one. But all we can really do, is put one foot in front of the other and make the best choices that we can." She looked to the young girl. "I can tell you're shouldering some heavy burdens, RWBY, and I won't ask what they are, it's not really my place. But if my daughter's words are any indication, then you have friends that you can talk to and rely on. They need you as much as you need them, so don't shut them out. You seem a good girl with a strong sense of justice, so I'm sure you'll make the right choices. Now, drink up that coffee before you catch a cold, young lady." That earned a giggle from Ruby as she drank the hot drink in her hands, which did help to warm her up a bit. Thanks, Miss Nikos. She stood up as she prepared to leave the park. I'm sorry again about your husband, but I think you did a great job with Pyrrha. She looked to the woman with a smile. She's great in every way possible. You should be proud. I am. Very much so. Penelope nodded as tears of joy filled her eyes. She waved Ruby off as the girl walked away and the older woman turned toward the sea again. Despite what she said, her own motherly instincts could not deny the worry she had for her child. But there was one thing she knew she could have faith in. In the last message she received, Pyrrha said she had met wonderful friends who saw her for who she was and not the invincible girl that most other people saw her as. They loved and valued her as a person, not a fighter. That alone meant the world to her. Even if she couldn't be there, she was confident her girl had people who would always have her back. And that was all she needed. The city of Mantle, which resided just below Atlas, was much more mundane compared to the floating metropolis in the sky. The days of Mantle were typically gray due to a constant fog that hung over the city as a result of repeated dust mining around the area. While Atlas above was vast, advanced, and luxurious, Mantle was far smaller, in terms of building size, and had more of an industrial appearance to it. It was almost a sheer stark contrast to compare the two, and yet the people who lived in this city were able to make the best of what they had, though if one were to ask the average citizen of Mantle what they thought of Atlas, they would receive mostly negative criticism, as those in Atlas usually looked down on those from the city below, while those from below felt they had been more or less abandoned by those above. There were two major locations that really stood out within this city. It was the giant wall on the outskirts that separated the grim-filled tundra outside, and the massive crater where the city of Atlas once stood before it ascended to the sky. And that crater was also the home to many faunas who had a difficult time finding any sort of livelihood in the city and had converted the giant hole in the ground to something akin to slums. Ironic how even in a city left behind, there were those that still were pushed down even further. One such street within Mantle was far more active than normal, however, and that was in part due to a pair of stolen dust carrier trucks owned by the Schnee Dust Company racing down the streets at high speeds, while a trio of hovering motorcycle-like vehicles, known as HVB rhinos, were giving chase. And those piloting these rhinos were the self-appointed protectors of Mantle, the happy Huntresses with Robin at the lead. Joanna rode one rhino herself by her leader's side, while May was right behind them on the third rhino with Fiona holding onto her tightly. A masked man opened the window to the passenger seat of one of the trucks and fired his dust gun at the pursuing Huntresses, but they were quick enough to avoid the gunshots before Robin and May fired their crossbows in retaliation. Though the latter's bolt took out the mirror of one truck, the gunman pulled back, and as the two trucks came to the end of the street and split off in two separate directions. "You three go left," Robin ordered, gesturing her teammates to pursue after one truck. "I'll take the one on the right." With nods from her team, the group of four split up as the three happy Huntresses veered left and pursued after that truck while Robin went after the one on the right. She then accessed her comms. "I got one truck heading towards the crater. Be ready." "You got it," the person on the other side radioed back as Robin sped up on her rhino. May, Fiona, and Joanna continued to chase after the one truck that had a gunman in the back seat fire more dust rounds at them, ranging from fire to ice to lightning. And the Huntresses did their best to move and avoid the rounds, but due to the sheer size of the truck and the narrow street they were riding on, it was rather difficult to find any kind of gap to get around. Fortunately, they had a plan. "All right ladies, time for a game of hide and seek," May called to her teammates. May's hands began to glow a blue-like color before she projected an energy-like dome around herself, Fiona, and their rhino, all while still moving. The second the dome went up around them, it appeared the two and their vehicle had disappeared completely. Joanna noticed a crossroads they passed by and briefly looked over the map of the area on her scroll attached to her rhino and could see all the intersecting roads. She smirked, knew the plan. "Hey, pull over. Not gonna tell you again," Joanna warned. "Go suck it," the driver of the truck shouted as his masked partner pulled out his dust round to shoot at her, but Joanna was able to maneuver around easily enough now that she had more room. She briefly pulled back on her rhino, causing it to slow down before moving to be on a straight path towards the passenger side of the truck, and that's when she went full throttle, driving in a straight line and drawing her weapon in its staff form. Once she was right next to the truck's passenger side, she slashed the door with her weapon to tear it off, allowing her to grab the gunman inside and yank him out. The driver cursed as he slammed on the gas pedal, hoping to reach the next intersecting street that was less than half a mile away. Unaware that the invisible May and Fiona were already there waiting for him. "You got it?" May asked her teammate. Fiona held her hands together, which began to glow a pale green, before she extended them outward. From out of nowhere, a multitude of lines of tire spikes were thrown onto the street at the crossroads before May pulled back just as the truck came down. The driver was about to make a sharp right turn, but he had already reached the spikes which slashed the tires. The momentum caused the truck to flip over on its side before it skidded to a halt on the street. The driver inside was banged against the seat and airbag of the flipped vehicle. It put him in such a daze that he was unable to register the sight of the door above him being ripped open and only regained his senses to see May Marigold, standing on top of the flipped truck, aiming her crossbow at him. "Give me a reason," she warned. As May secured the driver, Fiona and the just arriving Joanna went to the back of the truck, towards the locked doors that were now flipped horizontally. Fiona used her weapon to slice off the lock, allowing for one door to fall open and reveal the cargo inside. It was over a dozen faunas, men, women, even children, all with differentiating animal features on them like antlers, horns, claws, fangs, and feathers, and each of them had been restrained in some way with rope, duct tape, or straitjackets and were all gagged with the same materials. Some even had dog muzzles over their mouths. "It's okay. You're all safe now," Fiona assured as she went inside to free all the captives. "Robin, we got our truck. How are you looking over there?" Joanna asked over the comms. "We're about to catch our guy too," Robin relayed as she continued to chase after the last truck, swerving along the sides on her Rhino to avoid the dust rounds the passengers shot at her. "Eyes are locked on me. You're up, Silver." As she kept the attention of those in the truck focused on her, it made them unaware of Silver the Hedgehog, who flew over them with his psychokinesis, as he drew his weapon from behind. It was a circular shield-like object that was all white. After quipping it to his arm via an attached gauntlet, a series of curved spikes emerged from the edges which then charged with lightning dust. "All right, Galahad, let's see what you can do." With his psychokinesis, Silver threw the shield straight at the roof of the truck. The blades caused it to strike and pierce the very top of the driver's roof at an angle and even strike the engine, much to the shock of the two men inside. "What the?" Before they could react, the surge of lightning from the bladed shield spread all over the vehicle and caused it to shut down instantly, leading to the vehicle to grind to a halt. Silver landed on the road in front of the immobilized truck and used his powers to pull the shield out and reattached it to his gauntlet. "Get him," the driver ordered as he and his partner stepped out of the vehicle and fired their guns at him, but Silver slammed his shield on the ground to create an ice wall thanks to the ice dust inside to block the dust shots. The ice then shattered as the bladed shield known as Galahad was sent out through it, which struck the one gunman before it moved seemingly on its own to strike the second one on the head and knock him out before it returned to Silver's gauntlet via his powers. Robin gave an impressed whistle as she stepped forward. "Not bad, kid. Thanks, but I could have just caught both trucks with my power," Silver said as he lifted the two unconscious criminals with his psychokinesis and carried them around the back. "Would have been less risky." "I know, but it's good to practice," Robin said. "This way you get more used to your weapon and you can better focus your powers on being more direct. 'Cause it seems like you mostly use it as a blunt weapon when attacking." "I guess," Silver admitted. He still wasn't all that used to having a weapon, even if it was technically a shield as Marrow from the Ace Ops suggested. The curved blades on the edges made it sharp enough to cut through most grim, and all the dust rounds inside provided him with plenty of offensive and defensive options. He just had to take his time exploring each one. He wasn't exactly a fast learner like Blaze, Sonic, or even Shadow. Robin broke the lock to the back doors of the truck and opened it to see all the captive faunas inside, all bound and gagged like those in the other truck. Both she and Silver were relieved to see all the people inside were safe, but the fact that even children were held captive in this state made them sick. Sometime later, after the criminals were taken by the local police, Silver and the happy Huntresses helped the freed faunas return to their home in the crater, where they reunited with all their friends and family. Though the five were proud of this achievement, it wasn't exactly an isolated incident for them. That's the 6th mass kidnapping we've thwarted this week, Joanna said as the 5 of them stood over the edge of the crater. And no matter what we do, it doesn't seem to be stopping. If anything, it's only getting worse. Fiona shivered slightly, and her teammates knew the reason, evident as May put a comforting hand on her shoulder. All of them have been Faunus though. Why? Silver asked. Not sure, Robin said. There have been mass attacks on Faunus, like shootings and riots. But large-scale kidnappings this big? That's new. Before I left for Mantle, I have heard rumors among some people I knew up in Atlas. May began. About a powerful anti-Faunus movement run by the Atlas elite in the shadows. Never found any proof of it, but if something like that does exist. Well, let's go up to Atlas and find them, Silver stated. We don't even have proof that these guys exist, May replied. And even if they do, they have resources to cover their tracks. We'd need solid evidence for not only their existence but also their crimes. Otherwise, even Ironwood can't touch them. Not that he'd want to. Joanna scoffed, looking up towards the floating Atlas. His focus just seems to be on keeping everyone up there nice and comfy, while everyone else down here struggles. I don't know about that, Silver quickly said. I've met the general and he seems to care. He's just got a lot on his plate, like trying to save the world. Sure, that Eggman guy is a problem right now, but this whole thing has been a problem for years. Joanna gestured to all of Mantle. People up there have power, but they don't seem interested on putting it to good use. I swear, any one of those rich folks up there could make things easier for us down here. No offense, May. None taken, and I agree. May nodded. Silver then found himself looking to the crater, specifically all the Faunus living down there. But I don't understand this, he gestured to the crater. These people are struggling just like everyone else in Mantle. They could be helping each other. Why don't they? Fiona shook her head with a sigh. People have hated the Faunus long before Atlas and Mantle separated. Some people have tried to make things better, but with the likes of the White Fang making things worse. You don't really experience a lot of bigotry and prejudice, do you, Silver? Robin asked. Must be nice where you're from. Where I'm from, Silver muttered as he looked all around to crater and surrounding city of Mantle. Honestly, this is paradise compared to the world I come from. That took the happy Huntresses by surprise. I'm not from the exact same place as Sonic and his friends. Where I'm from was decimated long before I was born. His eyes closed as he could still remember all the fires and the monsters that dwelled within the flames, consuming and burning everything in their path. Every day was a struggle just to survive. Whether it just be trying to find food, or escaping mindless monsters that want nothing more than to kill you, there was no guarantee for your survival wherever you were. There were no kingdoms or armies, no heroes to protect you, no place to call home, just fire, ruins, and monsters. Each of the happy Huntresses looked in terror as they could only imagine something like that. Fiona was especially shivering at the mental image of monsters like the Grim rampaging through her home of Mantle with nobody there to stop them. That sounds like an apocalypse, Joanna muttered. That's exactly what it was, an apocalypse. Silver stated seriously. I tried to stop it, or to undo it however I could, but in the end, all I could do was help to erase it. Wait, what do you mean, erase it? May asked. I mean exactly that. My world no longer exists. Silver explained as best as he could. It's a long story and way too complicated to go into, but Sonic, myself, and other friends of ours tried to stop the monsters who destroyed my world from destroying everything else. We did, but in order to do that, we had to erase the world it came from. Like ripping out a whole tree to prevent the decay from spreading to the surrounding land. It was true. When they destroyed Solaris, the entire timeline had been reset. Silver's post-apocalyptic future had ceased to exist as a result, with only himself, Shadow, and Sonic being aware of what happened. Silver was confused as to why he even existed afterwards. If the world he was born from was erased, then he would be too, right? Shadow guessed that with Silver being in his super form and at the epicenter of Solaris destruction, the resulting chaos energy protected him somehow. This effectively made Silver something of a living paradox, an orphan of a deleted timeline. I'm glad that we won in the end, and that Apocalypse never came to be. Silver continued, but it was still my home. I hoped I could fix it, but it was all we could do. But at least you guys still have homes and families to go back to, right? Oh Silver, Fiona covered her mouth in shock as the rest of her teammates were rendered speechless. I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty or anything. Silver quickly raised his hands. I'm only saying that because, I'm not quite used to how society functions, or even society in general. I'm still getting used to it all. So stuff like prejudice against the Faunus, or the divide between Atlas and Mantle, it's still kinda new to me. I see, Robin then smiled as she kneeled to Silver's level. But the fact you're here helping us as opposed to up there, she pointed to Atlas. Speaks a lot of who you are. You might be a bit naive, but you got a good heart. Thank you, Silver. Don't ever lose sight of that. Hey, thanks. Silver smiled as he blushed slightly. I wonder how Blaze is doing right now. Blaze was currently sitting inside a manta alongside Penny, Seal, and the Aesops as it flew over the frozen tundra of the Solitas region, heading toward its intended destination, further north and away from the city. Are we there, yet? Marrow asked in a joking tone, earning a laugh from Elm and even a slight smile from Clover. That wasn't funny, Harriet said. Oh, come on, it was a little funny. Marrow told her, only for her to glare at him. Yeesh, sorry for trying to have a little fun. Is there a joke? Penny asked, looking towards Seal. Because I do not get it. Don't worry about, Seal replied. But I am indeed curious as to know the time of our arrival. We should be reaching the destination within 5 minutes. Clover said. Keep in mind, the area is likely swarming with Grimm. Here's hoping we didn't fly out here for nothing. Harriet commented. We were informed of the location of the Chaos Emerald being within this general vicinity. Vine recalled. And based on data we have received from our allies, the Grimm are drawn to them and can even enhance themselves with their power. I get they could only get a certain area instead of a specific spot, but I don't like flying in blind, personally. Elm said. But that is often the case in battle. Blaze told her. While having a prepared strategy can certainly help, one should also keep an open mind and be willing to adapt should something go wrong. I take it you have experience in that regard? Clover asked. I do. Blaze nodded. Simply put, try to be more flexible. I am most looking forward to this mission. Penny said with a smile. Aside from potentially retrieving a Chaos Emerald, this will be my first real combat with my upgrades. Just try not to push yourself too hard, Penny. We only just had you rebuilt. Seal said with concern. Duly noted, Seal. Penny said. Folks, this is your captain speaking, I think we arrived at our destination. The pilot up front said in a nervous tone. Are you sure, pilot? Clover said as he made his way to the cockpit. Yeah, the dozens of Grimm over there seemed to think so. The pilot pointed forward, revealing a mountainous region that was filled with a massive swarm of Grimm, so much so that the ground below almost looked black. The Grimm quickly took notice themselves as they roared, signaling for the dragon-like turrets to fly up towards the manta. There were even a pair of manticores. Oh look, the welcoming committee. Elm said as they all looked out the window. Pilot, open the door. Clover ordered. Everyone's outside, turn around to safe airspace and await further orders. If you have to, fly back to base for your own safety. But sir, the pilot protested. We can manage on our own. Clover stated. That's an order. Yes sir. The pilot nodded as he pressed a button to open up the hatch doors on the sides. Penny, time to test those upgrades of yours. Clear the skies. Clover said. Yes, sir. Penny saluted with an enthusiastic smile. I can assist in that regard as well. Blaze said as she drew a weapon, which appeared to be a rather thick-looking rapier, this weapon being named Levitain, and held it in her hands. Between the two of us, we can clear the aerial Grimm quickly enough and rejoin you to assist on the ground. All right, Clover accepted. Once you're both off, the rest of us are jumping. Penny was the first to jump out of the manta and used the thrusters on her boots to immediately take flight. Blaze, however, hesitated slightly as she only just looked down to see how high they were. It looked to be at least 800 feet in the air. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Don't think about how high we are. Focus on the moment. These people are counting on you. Just take down one Grimm at a time and make your way to the ground. With her eyes still closed, Blaze kicked herself off the manta and opened said eyes to see one Turrex flying towards her. That's when Blaze pressed a button on her rapier, causing the blade to split apart into 3 sections, like a 3-dimensional tuning fork, before she channeled her power into the weapon. This caused a flame to travel up the gap between the blades and effectively create a flaming sword, one that can better harness her own natural fire powers. The Turks flew straight for her as Blaze swung Levitain and sliced the flying Grim straight down the middle. She then ignited the flames at the soles of her feet to slow her descent, while also allowing for more aerial Grim to fly at her, which Blaze met by swinging her flaming Levitain to send waves of fire outward to slice and burn the Grim that flew at her. One Manticore however intercepted a fire wave with a fire blast from its mouth before gunning for Blaze, but she shot herself upward to avoid the flying thrust with bursts of flame from her feet before extinguishing them and allowing her to fall straight at the Manticore, her flaming sword pointing downward, which she used to pierce into the large aerial Grim's neck before slicing to cut its head off completely. Penny flew straight for a Manticore herself as it was flanked by several Turxes while the Manticore itself shot fireballs at Penny. The android girl then felt her palms open up before she thrusted them forward, sending bursts of green energy forward to not only intercept the fireballs, but also blast the Terrexes out of the sky, already taking down 3 before the rest of the aerial Grim encircled around her. However, Penny released her new wireless blades, floating array, all of which were energized and glowed green before she flew past all the Grim, each of the blades slicing through all the Grim like tissue paper, with even the Manticore's wings being severed by 2 of her blades. As she flew past them, all the flying Grim behind her either died or fell to the cold and unforgiving ground below. "Let's move, Ace Ops. Seal, stay close to us." "Yes, sir." The Atlesial huntsmen, including Seal, all saluted before jumping out from the Manta's open doors. As instructed, the pilot turned the aerial vehicle around to move to safer airspace as the 6 huntsmen all fell towards the ground. There seemed to be little issue with their descent as they saw flashes of flame and green energy light up the sky, dealing with all the aerial Grim. But they also looked down to see all the Grim on the ground, notably Sabers and Ursa, with the 2 Megaliths in the middle of the swarm, all moving to intercept them where they fell. Elm immediately drew her weapon, Timber, in its double rocket mode and fired a series of rockets onto the ground to blow away several of the Grim and clear a landing spot for them. Vine reached out with his aura arms to extend and generate a large bubble-like aura construct around himself and his teammates, Seal included, all while Clover flicked his pendant before they landed on the ground. The barrier faded as Vine had his hands on his knees and his teammates surrounded him. "You good, Vine?" Clover asked. "Give me 2 minutes," he replied. "Seal, you and Marrow cover Vine as he recovers," Clover ordered. "Everyone else, clear the Grim." "Yes, sir." They all replied as Clover led the charge with Harriet and Elm while Marrow and Seal stuck close to their recovering comrade. With her gauntlets, fast knuckles at the ready, and her body surging with electricity, Harriet zoomed forward and dealt a punch to one Saber's face to shatter it with one strike. She then went to an Ursa to deliver rapid strikes to its front and break it down and then zoomed to another Saber to smash it quickly enough. Between her speed and the strength provided by her weapons, she dealt with the frontmost Grim quickly enough, but was forced to fall back as the rest of the enemy would overwhelm her soon. That's when Elm and Clover both leapt over her to give her cover as Elm brought down her hammer onto the closest Ursa while also firing her rockets to shatter the icy ground underneath it, as well as that of the ground past it, halting the Grim's charge and shaking them off their feet. This gave Clover an opening to flail his Kingfisher around to slice at the throats of the disoriented Grim and while also swinging the pole at a Saber close to him to bring it down before pulling back on his hook to catch another charging Saber and smash it into the Ursa in front of him. Elm picked up her leader and put him on her shoulders with one hand before rooting Hersf into the ground with her semblance and fired continuous rockets into the oncoming Grim to tear through the rest, while Clover flailed his Kingfisher around to get any that got too close, and Harriet covered any gaps that he may have missed with her speed. However, there were a small number of Grim that did make it through, notably a trio of Sabers with 2 Ursa accompanying them, and they were gunning straight for the recovering Vine. But Marrow had already thrown his boomerang, Fetch, out before snapping and pointing his fingers forward. "Stay." With that command, all 5 of the Grim were frozen in place as Fetch spun in to kill the frozen Grim before returning to its wielder. At the same time, Seal dealt with 2 more Sabers and an Ursa that also slipped through. With her weapon, cricket, and semblance, Saul, in conjunction, she created a light sword construct which she used to decapitate the Ursa with a swing before flipping back to avoid the charging sabers. Once she had enough distance, she converted her light sword into a light whip to snap and slice at the sabers' front legs, immobilizing them enough and allowing her to shoot them with fire dust rounds from cricket to the heads to finish them off. However, a pair of Turexes flew straight towards the pair of Seal and Marrow, and both were ready to fight back. Only for a pair of large aura hands to stretch over them, catch the flying Grim, and smash them into each other before throwing them into the ground to finish them off. The two looked back to see the fully recovered Vine appear with a grateful smile. "I am recovered. Thank you, Marrow. You as well, Seal." He nodded. "You are welcome, sir," Seal said professionally. "Good, 'cause I get the feeling that the hardest part's just about to start." Marrow pointed to the incoming two megaliths, the last of the Grim, that were heading for their teammates. "Indeed. Let us give them a hand," Vine said as the three went to join their comrades and provide aid. Back in the air, Penny and Blaze appeared to deal with the last of the aerial Grim as the latter smashed a Turex's head in with a single punch, while the former incinerated two more with a wave of her flaming levitate and appeared to meet in midair. "That is all of them," Penny reported with a smile. "Good," Blaze nodded. "Pardon me for prying, Blaze. But you seem rather nervous despite the objective being cleared," Penny observed. "I'm fine, Penny," the fiery princess assured. "I'm just not too comfortable with heights." "Acrophobia," Penny noted in surprise. "But despite that, you still opted for aerial combat." She smiled. "Way to overcome your fear, Blaze. I commend you," she congratulated. "Thank you, Penny. Now, shall we get down?" A pair of elephant-like calls got their attention, causing the two to see Seal and the Aesops engaging in battle with the pair of giant Grim below. Megaliths. Among the strongest and most physically imposing Grim on the continent, Penny observed. "Let us help them." She was about to fly down. "Wait." Blaze stopped her as she took a second to observe the elephant-like Grim. "Their armor is rather thick at first glance, but those tusks of theirs." A smirk appeared on her face. "I know a way to end this battle quickly." "Stay." Marrow pointed his finger at a charging megalith, causing it to freeze in place. "I can't hold this one too long. We'll handle it." Elm fired all her rockets at its face, hoping to break off much of the large Grim's armor, but she only seemed capable of chipping it off at best. Meanwhile, Harriet ran all around the second megalith to try and keep it focused on her as Vine reached out with his aura legs to grab at its front legs and halt it. This allowed for Clover and Seal to swing onto the struggling megalith's face with their respective weapons via its tusks, and while airborne, Clover flung his reel while Seal fired cricket, both shots striking the megalith in the eyes, causing it to roar in pain. But this also forced its legs up, breaking from Vine's grasp and knocking her down. And the resulting slam of its feet shook up much of the ground that Harriet lost her footing and tripped on the ice. Seal was quick to land and rushed to help Harriet while Clover went for Vine, but the blind megalith was presently charging at them. Fortunately, it didn't get that far as Penny came flying down, the blades of floating array emerging from her back and appearing well above her head, linking together as they all glowed bring before she brought them down to completely sever the left tusk of the creature. At the same time, Blaze performed a similar motion as she shot herself down with flames from her feet, pulled back her flaming levitate and swung it to sever the right tusk of the second megalith, while also sending a condensed wave of fire to badly damage the left tusk. "Vine," Blaze says to drive the severed tusk into the megalith's neck. "I will keep it distracted." Penny sounded off as she flew to deliver a powerful punch to the side of the blinded megalith's face, one powerful enough to break up much of its armor before following with multiple energy blasts from her palms. Vine and Clover looked to the tusk as they both nodded to each other. Vine reached out with his aura hands to grab the severed tusk before thrusting it forward into the side of the megalith's neck, the area that Penny had made vulnerable with her attack and was able to pierce through, killing the Grim instantly. Elm was similarly following Blaze's advice as the two held the severed tusk from the second megalith together and pointed it forward like a ram. I can't hold it." Marrow struggled to keep the still frozen megalith in place. "Let it go," Elm shouted, leading to Marrow to drop his semblance, freeing the megalith as it charged at them. Elm rooted herself as Blaze channeled her fire into the severed tusk to superheat it and even set it ablaze before she and Elm threw it outward right as the Megaliar reached them, making sure to pierce through its unarmored underbelly. It's quickly disintegrated over them as Elm looked to Blaze with a smile and offered her hand for a high five, which the princess reciprocated. "Well done, Marrow." Blaze nodded to him. "All right. Not bad, Penny." Clover congratulated. "And good plan, Blaze." "Yes. To utilize your enemy's strength against them is genius," Penny added. "Thank you, but now let us focus on finding the Chaos Emerald," Blaze said. "It should be around here somewhere. Harriet, check the perimeter for any stragglers," Clover ordered. "Yes, sir." The fastest of the Ace Ops sped into the distance. "Everyone else, fan out. But keep comms open at all times. Do not lose sight of each other," Clover said. "Understood." The rest of the group all nodded as they went off in separate directions. However, the Ace Ops and their companions were unaware that they were being observed by a window created by the warp topaz, which allowed for Starline and Watts to see the search safely from within the control center of the ice base. Watts chuckled. They can search the entire region, but still not find their prize. Oh, to see Ironwood's top lapdogs chasing each other's tails is quite satisfying. Indeed, my friend, Starline said as he now had the white Chaos Emerald in his hand, while the cyan one he recovered from the SDC mine was safely contained behind him. And this is only a prelude. By the time we're done, we'll take everything from them and more. Atlas Military Base. Ironwood and Winter both walked down towards the laboratory, specifically a sealed-off section that had a pair of Atlesian Knight units standing guard. Once the appropriate command codes were put in at the screen by the door, it opened up, revealing Tails and Pietro both standing beside another door on the other side of the room of their own personal laboratory within the base. "Is she ready?" Ironwood asked. "She's ready," Tails confirmed as Pietro put in the code for the second door, allowing it to open as the four stepped inside. Within that room, 20 AK units were all standing by with their guns pointed forward at a metal table that was perpendicular to the floor, pointing straight up. And attached to the table was Cinder, fully conscious, and glaring with her single remaining right eye. All four of her limbs were replaced with simple robotic prosthetics, the kind that the Atlesian Knights were outfitted with, but were presently attached to the table she was suspended from. She was also given a white hospital robe for decency. "As you can see, she's regained cognitive function," Pietro explained. "Her limbs are magnetically attached to the table to keep her from moving. As far as we can also tell, her semblance is now useless without any limbs. But we're prepared to put her under should anything happen." Ironwood was the first to approach the restrained Cinder as she silently and hatefully glared at him. "Cinder Autumn, or is it Cinder Fall? Is that an alias or your true name?" he asked, but Cinder still remained silent. "I'm sure you've already noticed your current situation." He gestured around him. "But let me sum up the events that led you here, just so we're on the same page. Your attack on Beacon failed. The Academy still stands, and you've lost the Fall Maiden powers as well as your ability to steal said power. Salem and Eggman have abandoned you, left you for dead. No one is coming to rescue you. I have the power to decide whether you live or die. But you have information that could prove useful. If you cooperate, I promise that you will live, which is more than you honestly deserve. But you will tell me everything I need to know. The exact location of Salem's base, what she has available, anyone currently allied with her or Eggman, and how exactly she was able to find a way to siphon Maiden powers. So, which do you want to start with?" Cinder said nothing and instead chose to spit into Ironwood's face. Winter was about to step up, but Ironwood held his hand back to keep her from advancing as he used the sleeve of his other arm to wipe his face clean. "Make this easier on yourself," Ironwood told her. "You have nothing to gain from resisting and nothing to offer Salem or Eggman as you are now. I can guess that you honestly don't care what happens to Remnant. But they used you and left you for dead. At the very least, that calls for some payback, wouldn't you agree?" Once more, Cinder said nothing. Ironwood sighed before speaking again. "I don't want to resort to this, but if I have to I will." He placed his hand on her right robotic arm. "You see this? This was built because I ordered it be built. I could have easily left you as you were previously, limbless and confined to a hospital bed, where you would be unable to walk or feed yourself, and still have this conversation with you. But I chose to be merciful and give you the ability to physically take care of yourself. And I can just as easily choose to take that away. I put you back together, I can take you apart again. And have you fully conscious while I do it. If you don't want that, tell me what I want to know. Cinder glared with as much hatred as she could muster, but her gaze shifted past him as she set her sights on Tails. Where's your blue friend? All eyes turned to the young fox, who was surprised to have Cinder speak directly to him. Sonic's not here, right now. And honestly, you're not worth his time, he said with a glare. I'm not worth his time, Cinder repeated, speaking darkly. It should be the other way around. Where does a lowly alien, a pair of rats like you and him, get off by taking everything from me? None of what you had and lost was ever yours. Tails stated firmly. You stole it all. Cinder scoffed. You're not afraid of me. I've fought worse. Tails replied. Worse, you say? Cinder began. The fat man told me how you and your blue friend battled and defeated the likes of gods. And maybe you have. But I can also tell how you in particular are close to him. I swear to you, little fox, that when I get out of here, and I will, I am going to cut your head clean off and drop it in front of him. And as he screams in anguish, I'll burn his legs off and make him watch as I kill everyone he loves. Tails could tell that she was trying to scare him, but it wasn't working. If anything, he looked angrier at how she threatened to end his life solely for the sake of hurting Sonic and making him suffer. Yeah, I don't think so. Even if you do get out of here, I can take you. Tails said with confidence as he hovered close to her glaring face. Like you said, I've been face to face with some pretty crazy stuff, and you don't compare. I know you think you're special, but you're not. That earned a growl from Cinder as Tails continued. You're not some sacred chosen one destined for greatness, you're just angry woman lashing out at the world because you think you're owed something. A spoiled little brat with a superiority complex doesn't scare me, which honestly says a lot since I'm actually younger than you. He said with a laugh, which caused Pietro to chuckle with even Winter having a half smirk at that. So, why don't you cool off for a bit, and we can continue this conversation later, okay? He patted Cinder on the head, channeling a bit of Sonic's teasing energy. He set himself back down and turned to everyone. Let's go. It seemed like they wouldn't be getting any information from her, so Tails, Ironwood, Pietro, and Winter turned to leave the lab, leaving Cinder behind as the AK units kept their guns trained on her, with the cybernetic young woman glaring hatefully as her teeth gritted against each other. That little fox brat, looking down on her, treating her like some kind of spoiled child. Everyone was looking down on her. That blue rat, Sonic. All the students he made friends with, such as that silver-eyed runt. And especially. Her eye widened as she felt her mind flash back to facing Shadow the Hedgehog. The black and red walking natural disaster who utterly destroyed her despite having the full power of the maiden powers at her disposal. And he looked down on her the same way Tails did just now. You think so highly of yourself just because you wield a little power. I am power. Cinder screamed as she tried to block out those words and the memories. She tried to take as many deep breaths as possible to calm herself down. Pietro saw the young woman's brief panic attack as he looked through a monitor on the wall, showing live footage of Cinder's containment. He then turned to Tails, Ironwood, and Winter as they discussed their next stop. I don't think we're going to get much from her. At least not this quickly. The eldest Schnee daughter said. I'm no expert on psychology or anything, but I did notice how she lost her composure whenever I talked down on her. Tails commented. Cinder might have been dangerous before, but underneath it all, she's just desperate to prove herself. Maybe if we keep looking down on her like this, we'll get her to crack. If we had time, but I don't think we do. Ironwood said as he looked understandably worried. Despite our extensive searches, we have none of the Chaos Emeralds here on Solitas. Sonic has one though, Tails reminded. Found it in Mistral. Yes, but another in that same kingdom was stolen, and from my base. Ironwood was still fuming over that whole situation. He lost one of his top officers, who went behind his back just for the sake of some credit. If Cordovan had actually hand-delivered him the Chaos Emerald, going against his direct orders to cooperate with Sonic, he would have stripped her of her rank right then and there. But now she's dead and it left a crucial base vulnerable. How long until Harper reaches Argus? She should be arriving there any moment, sir. Winter answered. Good. Ironwood felt some relief at that. Olive Harper was a cable lieutenant. He was certain she could manage Argus. Sir, regarding my decision as to whether or not be the next Winter Maiden, Winter spoke up, getting everyone's attention. I've decided to accept the burden. Tails and Pietro both gasped with even Ironwood look in surprise. As you have said, time may not be on our side. Winter explained. But while we are unable to obtain any of the Chaos Emeralds that we can, we do have the ability to transfer the power from Freya to capable and trained fighter, one who could shift the power dynamic back to our side and be more ready to take the fight to the enemy. Winter, are you considering the aura transfer? Pietro asked. No. She shook her head before her eyes softened somewhat. To be honest, I think the best way to handle the transfer is to painlessly euthanize Freya. And I can be by her side as it happens. Euthanize? Tails didn't exactly like that. It's far less risky than the transfer machine that was used at Beacon. Winter replied before looking to Tails. Let me be clear that I do not like this, but if we have the chance to gain any kind of advantage against Salem or Eggman, we should take it. Winter, are you sure? Ironwood asked with seriousness and concern. He trusted Winter's judgment and knew she was more than capable. But the burden of the maidens is not one to be taken lightly. Because there is no going back from this. I know, Winter said with some minor reluctance before steeling herself. But this is my choice. I thought long and hard about it since you asked me, sir. And I would be honored and humbled to accept the burden. Ironwood had known Winter for a long time, and whenever she put her mind to something, that was it. She was dead set on succeeding Fire as the next Winter Maiden, and he knew she wasn't wrong either. With so many unknown variables in the air, and time being against them, they had to do everything they can to be prepared. Very well. Winter, wait. Tails went over to her. I understand if this is what you want, and I'll help if you need. But have you told Weiss about your decision? That's when Winter's resolve faded slightly. No. You should. Tails said firmly. And preferably before the transfer happens. She deserves to know. You're right, she does. Winter agreed before looking to Pietro. How soon can we begin? Pietro was reluctant to give an answer but gave it regardless. We can have everything ready by tomorrow morning. Father has arranged for the charity performance that Weiss is staring in to take place tonight. Winter said. Between that and gathering what intel she can from the SDC, I imagine she's rather focused. I'll contact her as soon as the event is over. All right. Tails nodded. Mistral. A single airship flew steadily across the skies, one that was being piloted by an agent under Spider, which carried several questionable characters inside. This included Hazel, Tyrion, Vermilion, Mimic, Neo, Ruff, and Tumble, as well as a new addition to their team, a huntsman that worked directly under Malachite. This huntsman appeared to be a man in his late 20s or early 30s with pale skin and golden eyes. He also appeared to have a golden tattoo of a third eye on his forehead as well. He had long black hair tied back in a ponytail with a white flame-like pin keeping it all tied together. The man's attire consisted of a primarily white robe with black armored armguards, a red belt tied across his waist, and black kung fu pants with black armored shin guards. He also carried a weapon which appeared to be a three-pointed double-edged lance strapped to his back. Hazel looked at the huntsman questionably. I knew Malachite had more than a few huntsmen under her employ, but I never expected it to be the legendary Earl Shen. You're one of the most renowned huntsmen in the kingdom, and yet you work for a crime lord. In the past, I have made an attempt to purge crime from this kingdom like a plague, as was the reason I chose to be a huntsman. The man named Earl Shen began. And yet, despite all my efforts, for each criminal I put away, no matter how high ranked they were, someone would always rise to take their place. Defeating one enemy only creates a vacuum for somebody else to fill. Crime cannot be stopped, but it can be controlled. I am the first to admit that I do not like Malachite, but if her methods allow us to better control the kingdom and keep it safe, then that is what I'll do. Hazel could understand his perspective a little bit. It was the same sort of thing with Salem. No matter how many people stand against her, no matter how strong they were, nothing could actually defeat her. She could be delayed, but that's the best they could do. In the end, a force of nature like that cannot be truly stopped, and all those who sacrifice their lives to try and do so, no matter how young or innocent, ultimately throw their lives away for nothing, his sister being one of them. And Ozpin uses them as martyrs to recruit more young souls to die and keep Salem delayed. It made him sick. And while he wasn't Salem's biggest fan either, much like how Earl Shen appeared to dislike Malachite, if her way means the end of the Huntsman Academies and the end of children throwing their lives away, then he'll do what he has to do make that reality come true. Well, we certainly do appreciate the addition to the team. Tyrion chuckled. A bright flash caught everyone's attention as the group looked to see Ruff holding a gun-like weapon that had electricity coming out of its barrel. Whoa, so, this thing shoots lightning too. He looked to his trigger to see a switch with different elemental symbols on each side. Huh, so I got fire, lightning, and ice. It's like having 3 flamethrowers wrapped up in one. This is awesome, he exclaimed with a grin. You can keep that fancy thing, bro. Me, I prefer the classics. Tumble held a large mace weapon. Just a good old smashin' tool is fine with me. Suddenly, a series of tentacles came out to wrap the Skunk brothers by their wrists and stop them from messing with their weapons. Unless you wanna send this aircraft plummeting to the ground, put those things down. Mimic advised while Neo looked at them with glares. This is why we don't give weapons to dumb kids. Ease off, armhead. Ruff glared as he held his dust thrower weapon. Don't make me use this thing on you. And what's with the silent treatment? Tumble pointed to Neo. What? You too good to talk to us. Neo can't talk period, idiots. She's a mute. Mimic's eyelids lowered, while Neo gestured to her open mouth as no sound came out for emphasis. Oh, so she can't hear us? Tumble asked. That's being deaf, you moron. Mimic corrected as Neo smacked her hand to her face. That's enough. Vermilion stood up as he appeared directly behind the Skunk brothers. But I do agree with the octopus. Wait till we're on the ground before you use those new weapons of yours, otherwise I'll drop you out of this ship myself and watch you plume it. He glared hard at Ruff and Tumble, carrying such an intimidating presence that it made them shiver somewhat as they backed down. Oh okay. Ease off, Ruff shook as he lowered his dust thrower. Yeah, we were just messing around, Tumble chuckled nervously as he put his mace away. Neo looked to Mimic as she gestured with her thumb to the Skunk brothers and raised a questioning eyebrow, silently asking why they got settled with these two idiots. I know, but at least they'll make good cannon fodder. Mimic whispered to her. And the louder the noise, the easier it is for folks like us to get the drop on them, right? He asked with a sinister smirk, which did earn a smirk from Neo as she seemed to agree with that much at least. Indeed. Tyrion looked to Ruff and Tumble with a seemingly sincere smile. Play nice, boys, or we'll take your toys away. He chuckled. Okay, we get it. We'll tone it down, Ruff exclaimed, backing away from the scorpion Faunus and closer to his brother. Nutjob, Tumble muttered. Where exactly are we going? Hazel asked Vermilion as things settled down on the ship. Based on Malachite's reports, the Blue Hedgehog has been zipping across the entire kingdom these past few weeks, visiting mostly Faunus villages under Sienna Khan's jurisdiction. Vermilion explained. He has impressive speed, I'll grant him that. But the other aliens, as well as the children under his protection, are currently settled in Argus as Lionheart manages things over there. Shen added, though an officer from Atlas should be arriving later today to relieve him. If you're planning on going to Argus, I must object. Hazel said. Though it's technically within the kingdom of Mantle, there is a rather large garrison of Atlesian soldiers stationed there. It would be the equivalent of walking into a Leviathan's mouth for us. Of course we're not going to Argus, Hazel. Vermilion told him. And even if we were, by the time we'd arrive, they'll be long gone. This rodent never seems to stay in one place too long, and those under his care follow him wherever he goes. So, tell me, what is the best way to catch someone who moves faster than you? Why, by having them come to you, of course. Tyrion answered with a snicker. So, we're going to lure Sonic and his companions directly to us and have them fight on our terms. Yes, Vermilion confirmed. And we already know exactly which place to lure them to. It obviously can't be a settlement within the White Fang, as Sienna could rally her forces to aid him. What of the Bronwyn territory? Hazel questioned, but at the mention of that name, Hazel noticed Vermilion's form shake slightly as his fists clenched tightly. As far as we can tell, they're remaining neutral. Shen answered. Malachite still hasn't gotten the spy she caught to talk quite yet. But after their stunt in Argus, killing the commander there, I imagine they're going to lay low as the heat dies down. Which is actually the perfect opportunity to strike, Tyrion stated. Lionheart said that Sonic and his companions sought to ask Little Raven and her birds for aid. But with her assassination on Cordovan, tensions are high between them and they're less likely to ally with each other. So, we attack before that happens. Hazel seemed to get it. Still though, I must express concern that we cannot underestimate Sonic the Hedgehog. One of our own made that mistake and it cost all of us. I agree with the big guy right there. Mimic said. Sonic and his friends are tough, but they do have a serious weakness, those kids they've adopted, and they've got plenty of issues. Not only that, but there is a village nearby that is not aligned with either the White Fang or Raven in Mistral. Vermilion commented. A village from Sonic's world that if we were takeover, would be the perfect place to use against Sonic and enclose around him like a noose. What's the name of this village? Hazel questioned. I believe Lionheart called it Spiral Hill. Shen answered. A village of Sonic's friends. Tyrion questioned before a deranged smile formed on his face. Sounds like fun. He chuckled before erupting into a full-blown maniacal laugh. At the same time, flying just above the aircraft, was Metal Sonic, who stuck behind the cloud cover. He was able to hear the plan thanks to the scroll that Hazel had turned on during the conversation, and it was a fairly decent plan. Essentially luring Sonic into a trap. Though he doubted it would work as Eggman had attempted that numerous times. Still, a chance to test his new weapon against his organic counterpart sounded enticing. Metal glanced behind to his newest weapon which was magnetically attached to his back, which seemed to be a bright red rectangular-like object. After using it to butcher the Black Sheep family, Metal Sonic decided to modify that specific weapon to better suit his own combat needs. What was once a child's toy used for fighting Grimm, was now a weapon worthy of him. The only complaint he had was that he didn't have the time to fix the color. I was built to be Sonic the Hedgehog perfected. So it's only fitting that Crescent Edge should be perfected as well. Meanwhile, in another part of Mistral, Amelia drove her pickup truck across the natural road with Oscar sitting in the passage seat next to her. All the stuff they had packed up had been safely secure in the back of the moving vehicle, as they had spent the last couple of weeks, driving from village to village as they made their way west towards the port city on the harbor that could get them a flight or ship to Vale. The journey had been long, but so far uneventful. They made sure to stop at various villages that seemed armed and capable of holding out in the event of a possible Grimm attack and spent the night there before resuming their drive. Amelia made it a point to find a village to stay at before sundown as she felt it would be safer than just trying to drive through the wilderness at night or even camp out, a sentiment that even Ozpin felt was safe. And in all the villages they stayed at, Ozpin was the first to notice a pattern. The situation is indeed as tense as you described it. The spirit of the professor spoke through a projection of his own reflection in the rearview mirror. Well, what do you expect? With no huntsman, people have to protect themselves. Amelia commented. I understand how difficult things must be for you, and everyone here, but I'm hopeful a solution can be found and we can overcome this. Ozpin said. Hey, out of curiosity, since you have your own shadow group, why can't you simply use them to secretly take out the bad guys in power? Oscar asked. The thought has come to mind more than once, and I have done so in previous lifetimes of mine. Ozpin answered. But depending on the situation, it may make matters worse. As is the case with the current Mistralian Council, one of whom is a dangerous crime lord, should she disappear overnight, the resulting power vacuum would trigger infighting within the city of Mistral, which could lead to more Grimm being drawn into the city. Worst possible case scenario, the kingdom could fall, just as it almost did for Vale when Beacon was attacked. Why not have one of your guys fill that spot? Amelia asked. That way you'd better control things. I have tried similar methods before, putting certain people in power with the hope they can help manage the situation. Ozpin replied. In most of those cases though, it never works out. Either the person is corrupted by the environment around them or the power they obtain, or those of malicious intent turn their attention towards my people and that still leads to infighting. I can see you trying to find a simpler solution to these problems, but sometimes there is no simple solution. Believe me, I've looked. Guess I never thought of it like that, Oscar commented as he looked out the window to the wilderness of the Mistralian land. Life's complicated, Oscar. Far more than we'd like it to be. I can at least agree with him on that. Amelia said. Pardon me for asking, but is that why you prefer the simple life of a farmer? Ozpin asked. This caused Amelia to look at the reflection of Ozpin questionably. I am not criticizing you or anything, simply making conversation. The woman sighed before answering. That farm has been in our family since Oscar's dad and I were kids. Some people wanted to move out to the main city for a different kind of life, but I much prefer the farm. We keep to our own and not get involved in any of the complicated city stuff. And yeah, things can get complicated on the farm, but it's at least more manageable. I can understand and respect that. Everyone has their own preference. Ozpin said with a slight smile, though it was quick to fade. And I realize how badly my intrusion has affected your lifestyle, and I am sorry. Forget it. Amelia brushed off. I've already accepted that you popping into my nephew isn't your fault. I'm just pissed in general that it had to happen to the only family I got left. Ozpin didn't quite respond right away. While he was happy to hear how Amelia no longer blamed him, it still didn't make it any less frustrating for her or Oscar, nor did it lessen his own guilt of inadvertently dragging this simple family into a war against the worst monster to ever walk Remnant. If you don't mind me asking, how did Oscar's parents? A storm on our farm. Oscar answered. A real nasty one. I was 5 when it happened. There was a flood and, he didn't quite finish, but the implication was still there. You have my condolences. Ozpin said with sympathy to both Oscar and Amelia, the two having mourning looks in their eyes as they pressed forward. I too lost a family. This got both their attention. And when I say, I refer to the first life I've lived. I was a father, I had a wife and children. But a monster took them all away. Oscar looked to the reflection of Ozpin with shock and pity, and Amelia's expression softened somewhat. Sorry to hear that. Amelia, watch out. Ozpin attempted to alert her, but it was too late. Crash. Something large had impacted the driver's side of the truck, causing it to slide off the road as the woman tried desperately to take control of the steering wheel as the vehicle continued to swerve, only for the passenger side to smash into a tree. The airbags deployed as Oscar and Amelia were pressed back against their seats. What was that? Oscar exclaimed. Grim, you are in danger, Ozpin warned. True to his word, the driver's window was smashed open as a Beowulf's maw tried to get at Amelia. Oscar gave a scream as his aunt instinctively pushed him back with her hands and she pushed herself back while also kicking at the Beowulf's face and trying to force its jaw closed. She shakily and quickly reached for the shotgun that was behind the seats as the vehicle continued to shake from the Beowulf's attacks. By the time she got the gun, the passenger door was yanked off as the Beowulf opened its mouth to devour the prey inside. Only for Amelia to thrust her shotgun into the Beowulf's mouth and fire, blasting out the back of its head and killing it. There are more coming, Ozpin alerted. Oscar, stay here, Amelia told her nephew as she got out of the car. But Aunt M, he tried to protest. Don't argue with me. Just stay here, she exclaimed as she went to the truck bed and managed to get a hatchet as she loaded up her shotgun. After clipping the hatchet to her belt, Amelia turned around and could see a pack of 6 Beowulfs approaching them menacingly with growls and roars. Amelia looked back to her frightened nephew as she tried to give him an assuring smile before facing the pack of Grim. She cocked her shotgun and glared at the pack. Come on, you bastards. One Beowulf charged right at her, but before either could make a move, something swung down from a nearby tree and smashed its skull in from above, smashing the Grim into the ground. I don't think so. Tangle smirked. What in? Amelia blinked in surprise at the sight of the strange creature with Oscar gasping himself. But none were more surprised than Ozpin as he saw this anthropomorphic lemur through Oscar's eyes and recognized her characteristics, being similar to THT of Sonic and his companions. She's from Sonic's world. Let's go, boys. Tangle called out as she turned to face the 5 remaining Grim, all of whom were shot at by a series of blue electric bolts on the sides to disorient them, courtesy of Neptune as he rushed onto the scene with his teammates, Sage and Nolan by his side, while Scarlet glided over them from above. Neptune went for the closest Beowulf as he continued to shoot rapid shots before converting his gun, try-hard into its trident form, and lunged it into the Beowulf before killing it with a surge of electricity from the inside. Sage raised his massive sword, Pilgrim, and brought it down on the Beowulf that charged him and smashed its head and back to pieces, killing it instantly. Nolan thrusted his cattle prod into the stomach of another Beowulf, electrocuting it and leaving it open for Scarlet to fire down with his pistol hooked to the back of its head to kill it before landing behind Nolan, standing back to back as another Beowulf came at them, which Scarlet sliced it with his sword, Darling. Nolan swerved around and lunged his cattle prod to shock the Beowulf before Scarlet finished it with a sing of his sword to decapitate it. The two shared smiles and nods with each other. Lastly, the final Beowulf went straight for Tangle, who leapt over it while her tail extended underneath the Grim before she pulled onto it, binding and ensnaring the monster. Who wants to go for a spin? Tangle spun on her feet, holding her extended tail upward as she spun the entangled Grim around and gathering momentum before she raised it up high and slammed it onto the ground to smash the Grim before her tail retracted. "Ooh yeah, give me 5, boys," Tangle called to her friends. "High five," all 4 of the boys said simultaneously as they shared a group high five with Tangle. "Are you folks okay?" Neptune asked as they then approached Amelia and Oscar, the latter of whom was still inside the truck. And now that he got a good look at her, Neptune could see how pretty Amelia was. "Oh, hey there. What's a pretty thing like you doing out here?" Amelia's eyelids lowered in annoyance before Sage pulled Neptune back. "Sorry about him. He's not right in the head when it comes to women. But seriously, are you okay?" "We're fine, thank you," Amelia said with relief. Oscar tried to crawl out through the truck but almost slipped and fell. Fortunately, he was caught with Tangle's tail. "Whoa, gotcha." She used her tail to help prop him up. "You good?" Yeah, Oscar could only blink as he saw this creature. She wasn't human and clearly not a faunus. Was she from the same world as this Sonic, the golden hero? "I'm afraid that I do not recognize this individual. She wasn't with Sonic at Beacon." Ozpin relayed to Oscar telepathically. "So who are you?" Oscar asked. "Tangle the lemur," she introduced with a friendly smile. "These guys here are called Team SSNN. She gestured to the 4 boys next to her, all 4 of whom waved. "They've been helping me keep the area around my hometown safe." "Your town?" Amelia looked in surprise as she pulled out her map. "The next village is supposed to be 20 miles from here." "Yeah, it's complicated, but my place is less than 1 mile away." Tangle said. "If you want, you guys can stay with us until you're ready to hit the road." "That might be their only option," Nolan said as he brought up the truck's hood to get a good look at the engine inside, which was already smoking. "This thing's in bad shape. No way you can drive in this." "Can you fix it?" Scarlet asked. "With the right tools, but it would take a couple days." Nolan answered. "Then maybe it would be best that you stay with us until then." Sage offered. "And you're sure your village is safe?" Amelia questioned. "Oh, beyond sure. Trust me, we've been handling this place like champs," Tangle assured as she offered Amelia her hand and Oscar her tail, the latter being especially surprised by that. "What do you say? Bunk with us till you're ready to hit the road. You should accept her offer," Ozpin said telepathically to Oscar. "Aside from having a safe place to rest, if she is from the same world as Sonic, perhaps she can get into contact with him and they can help us." Oscar was still somewhat unsure, but given what Ozpin just said, as well as their truck being out of commission, it didn't really seem like they had any other options. "Yeah, we'll stay with you." Oscar shook Tangle's tail, much to his own confusion, before giving a knowing look to his aunt, who immediately understood that this was a choice made by Ozpin and she too felt it was their best option. "All right," she nodded. "Cool." Tangle smiled. "Let's see about getting your truck moved," she said as the rest of Team SSNN worked on moving it. Oscar and his aunt got back inside the vehicle and put in neutral, making it easier for Sage to push while Neptune, Nolan, and Scarlet walked alongside it with their weapons on hand, and Tangle lead the way. "Spiral Hill, here we come." She pointed dramatically to the direction of her hometown. Meanwhile, Sonic sped through Mistral, making his way back to Argus as Rosa flew alongside him, the Wisp able to keep up with his casual jogging speed as they reached their destination. They would soon spot the giant wall that separated the port city from the wilderness and sped through the gate with little issue, streaks of blue and pink being seen by anyone who happened to catch notice. Those same streaks sped through the streets of the city, catching a few pedestrians' attention as they walked by on the sidewalk. It didn't take long for the pair to arrive at the port to the Argus military base, where an entourage of soldiers were assembled, including the guards that worked under the late Cordovan. RWBY, Young, Knuckles, Amy, and Lionheart were also present to see the blue blur and Wisp arrive on the scene. "Hey guys," he greeted with his usual smile. "Welcome back, Sonic." Amy smiled. "Where's Sienna?" Knuckles questioned. She wanted to stay behind with the Faunus villages on her turf, see about getting them ready for a fight. Sonic answered. "You find Raven?" Young questioned with an angry look in her eyes, which they all noticed and looked with concern. "Sped through the territory you pointed out," Sonic said, looking to Lionheart. "No sign of her or the Babylon rogues. If there's one thing that woman is good at, it's hiding," Lionheart commented, causing Young to look away with an annoyed scoff. "You doing okay, Young?" Sonic asked. "What do you think?" the blonde said bitterly as she looked away with a pout. "Give her some time," Knuckles said to Sonic, and they both could understand why. They were certainly upset with Raven's actions themselves, killing Cordovan, stealing the Chaos Emerald with the rogues, and abandoning her daughter yet again. Yeah, they had some rather harsh words planned for her and Jet, and that was putting it mildly. RWBY wanted to reach out to her sister, but felt herself hesitating, as she somehow felt that maybe she might make it worse. So, she lowered her hand a bit. Rosa then came up to her and nuzzled RWBY's face a bit, to try and cheer the girl up, which caused RWBY to smile somewhat, but it was quick to fade, something Amy noticed herself. Lionheart then looked to his watch. Cordovan's replacement should be arriving any minute now. Almost on cue, an Atlas dropship could be seen coming from the ocean, with a pair of bullheads providing escort. The group backed away from the landing pad as the ships arrived soon enough and landed. The main vessel's hatch opened as the Atlesian officer stepped out with a pair of guards by her side. Lieutenant Colonel Olive Harper reporting for duty. She saluted. Cordovan's old guards approached to salute her as well. "Ma'am." They both saluted. "The Argus military base is yours," one stiff guard said. "Just say the word and we'll follow your orders without hesitation," the second guard added. Harper raised a slight eyebrow at their demeanor and looked to Lionheart. "Are they always like this?" "It would seem so," the headmaster of Haven confirmed as Sonic, RWBY, and the others had their eyelids lowered in annoyance. "But they are competent soldiers and will be invaluable to you." "That's all I ask," Harper said. "Now, Headmaster Lionheart, first of all, thank you for watching over the city of Argus at this time. I realize you have a stressful duty managing your own academy, so General Ironwood and I both appreciate you going out of your way to avoid an unfortunate situation potentially unfolding into greater chaos." "Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel." Lionheart smiled. "Now, regarding your recent conversation with the General," Harper began. Lionheart's smile faded. "I already said, no. Headmaster, with all due respect, I realize that Caroline Cordovan absolutely acted out of line and did potentially endanger the city she was supposed to be protecting." Harper continued before looking to Sonic. "And you have mine and General Ironwood's utmost apologies for the trouble that caused you." "Yeah, we get it," the Blue Hedgehog responded. "But her assassination cannot be overlooked, and Raven Bronwyn must be brought in," Harper insisted. "If I don't break her legs first," Young muttered. "Let's keep our cool, Young," Knuckles told her. "And I can understand all that." Lionheart spoke to the lieutenant. "But as I've explained to James, deploying a military force onto the Kingdom of Mistral will cause more harm than good. Tensions are at an all-time high with just the growing Faunus tension alone, and that's already caused an upsurge of grim activity. People could see this as Atlas invading our kingdom and panic, which would only make things worse. We can't solve this matter with brute force." Harper could see what he meant by that and partially agreed with it herself. That being said, she couldn't let something like this go unpunished either. She happened to look to Sonic again. "How exactly were you unable to find Bronwyn with your speed?" she asked. "From what I gather, you can comb an entire continent in a day. I've in all the territory she'd be likely to hide in, but couldn't find her," Sonic answered. "But there is one spot that I haven't checked. That got everyone's attention. The mountains near the villages on her turf. They're pretty rough and look like a maze at first glance. I could probably comb through them, but I'd need some extra time. If I had to take a guess, she'd be there." "Then how about this?" Harper spoke to Lionheart again. I can arrange for a few scout ships to survey the mountains and look for any possible signs of a base there. You can tell the council that you called in for assistance from Argus because you're concerned for possible grim activity up there. And as soon as they find something, they'll report to me and you. I'll give them the direct orders not to engage." Lionheart considered it for a moment before coming to a decision. "Very well. But I expect to be kept in the loop." "Of course." Harper nodded. "Is there anything else that you need from me?" Lionheart asked. "I need to return to Haven as soon as possible." "No, we're done here. Thank you again, Headmaster." Harper saluted, as did her soldiers before walking away toward the base. "We should probably hit the road too," Sonic said to his group. "Head back to Haven." "What about?" Yang was likely about to suggest that they join the search party for Raven, but Knuckles was quick to speak to her. "We need to see how things are going in the city before we make our next step. Don't forget the relic underneath there," the Red Echidna reminded. "Without knowing who or where the Spring Maiden is, Haven is still vulnerable." Knuckles is right, this isn't just about the Chaos Emeralds. "We also gotta help Sienna with the White Fang here," Amy added. "I promise Yang, we'll help you find Raven and smack some sense into her, but we got other priorities here," Sonic said. Yang knew they were right, but that didn't change the fact that she wanted to find Raven and beat the ever-living crap out of her. But she knew deep down that their wants and needs had to come second. So, with great reluctance, she tried to put her anger away with the intent on channeling it onto whatever challenge they would soon face. RWBY could see how everyone was getting ready to leave, but she still had something weighing on her mind. And right now, she had someone in front of her who could potentially give her answers to questions that have been burning in the back of her mind since she left Patch. "Professor Lionheart," the silver-eyed girl spoke, causing said professor to turn to her. "If you have an extra minute, could you please answer a few questions I have, about my mom?" Sonic, Amy, and Knuckles looked to RWBY in confusion at that, but none were more surprised to hear that request than Yang. Lionheart was certainly surprised himself, but he could tell from the look in this girl's eyes that she was hoping for some answers. He gave a nod of understanding as he delivered his response to her request. "Of course. Atlas, Schnee Manor. Ever since the collapse at the Schnee mines, Weiss had been more or less placed on house arrest in all but name. She was not to leave the mansion under any circumstances unless he said otherwise, with the only except that she was aware of being the charity concert tonight that she was scheduled to perform in. Klein was very much against this action and was about to speak his mind when he first heard the news, but Weiss was able to convince him not to, as she seemed to agree with her father's decision and felt that maybe it would be best for her to stay home. This decision was a surprise for both Klein and Jacques, albeit a pleasant surprise for the latter as he seemed convinced that Weiss all but abandoned her, childish rebellion, as he put it. But of course, when Jacques wasn't looking, Weiss just subtly explained to Klein that she was only playing at his ego and had a personal reason to stay at the house, a very important reason that could potentially be a matter of life and death, and she couldn't tell him the details without risking putting him in danger. Klein had accepted that and promised to give Weiss his support in whatever she needed, which she was truly grateful for. Since then, she barely left her room and seemed confined to her computer, only taking breaks to step outside and stretch her legs in the garden, as well as practice her skills in the training chamber. Jacques initially thought the activity was a waste of time, until Weiss told him that she would still need to know how to defend herself as the Schnee Dust Company made no shortage of enemies. Jacques agreed on the condition that he observed her practice, under the pretense to see how much her daughter has grown since leaving for Beacon, but Weiss knew that Jacques was doing it just to keep an eye on her and make sure she didn't try anything. Seeing his smug look as she honed her craft made her feel sick, but she had to bear it as she had a very important mission to do for Sonic, RWBY, and all her other friends. And she was currently working on said mission now as she was accessing various files in her family's company digital mainframe via her own personal computer. Though her access was somewhat limited, only her father had full access, there was still plenty she could get with her own credentials. That included all the dust sales through the past couple of fiscal years, going a bit before Eggman's arrival on Remnant. Okay, so the total lost dust quantity throughout the whole fiscal year alone is worth noting. But just like before, it doesn't give us any solid answers as to who provided it or how they gave it to Eggman. Weiss muttered to herself as she continued to look at the files. Let's see how deep I can go with this. When she tried to access the more restricted files, a bright red lock screen appeared on her monitor that read, "Access denies. Please provide CEO credentials." Weiss wasn't the least bit surprised. Of course, she scoffed in annoyance. "I may not be a hacker, but I know someone who is." With a smirk, Weiss pulled out her own scroll and pressed an icon that resembled a yellow furball with a pair of twin fox tails at the end. She held her scroll out in front of the monitor as the yellow ball bounced from her scroll to the monitor and performed a spindish against the lock screen until it shattered and turned green. "Access granted. Welcome, Jacques Schnee." The monitor read. "Tails, your genius never fails to impress," Weiss said. "Now to copy and download all the files before father catches on." She pressed a few key commands on her monitor and placed her scroll on it as a loading bar was screened, the files all being copied and downloaded. That's when her scroll began to buzz, the caller ID being displayed on the page read, "Iona Rockshow." Making sure the copied files were still being downloaded, Weiss answered the call. "Hello, Iona," she greeted with a smile. "Weiss." The little girl's face appeared on her screen. "Are you excited for tonight?" "I am. I can't wait to see you perform. Papa always says he's heard you sing and have a beautiful voice and I want to hear it too." "Oh, you're going to the charity event. I thought you were still grounded," Weiss said with a pleasantly surprised tone. "Papa said I could go if I was with him at all times." "I really want to hear you perform," Iona said. Weiss smiled. "I'm glad to hear it. I can promise you're in for quite the show. Can you tell me about it?" Iona asked. With a smirk mimicking a certain blue hedgehog, Weiss shook her finger teasingly. Nah. It's a surprise." She saw Iona put on a pouting face through the screen. "Ah, isn't that a cute little face?" The girl's face turned red at that as she tried to cover her face in embarrassment, which honestly made Weiss giggle. "But seriously, you're going to love what you see tonight. I'll be looking for you in the crowd." That caused Iona to smile brightly. "I'll be in one of the balconies with Papa. I'm sure you'll see me. Then it'll be easy to spot you." "I gotta go, Iona," Weiss said. "Talk to you later." "Goodbye, Weiss. See you tonight." Iona waved as she hung up, showing the files still being downloaded. Weiss smiled as she leaned back in her seat. Iona was such a sweet girl. Ever since they escaped the mines together, the child kept on calling her to talk with her, and Weiss was more than happy to accept. Iona asked frequent questions of what life was like outside of Atlas, specifically in Vale and Beacon. The girl never left the kingdom as she mostly worked in her father's amusement park in Atlas, which honestly impressed Weiss. The girl was only 8 and she was already a master engineer. Nowhere near Tails' level, but it wasn't anything to scoff at either. The girl was such a ball of energy and Weiss couldn't help but adore that. She reminded her so much of RWBY and how she missed her. Of course, their talks weren't all just friendly, as Iona had said in one call on how her older brother was killed in a White Fang attack, in which Weiss' heart went out to her. She even remembered attending the funeral for said brother, though she didn't recall seeing Iona there. Perhaps her father left her home as to not be overwhelmed or something like that. Well, regardless, Weiss could also tell that Iona had some resentment towards the Faunus because of her brother's death, and she couldn't blame her. At the same time, she had hoped that maybe she could help Iona to understand that not all Faunus are the same as the White Fang, and that there was a reason the organization resorted to violence, not that she agreed with it. But regarding their recent conversation, Weiss remembered that she had to make a call before the event tonight. So while the files were still downloading, the heiress pulled up one of her contacts and made the call. After a few seconds of ringing, the call was answered. "Yellow." Flint Cole greeted, his face appearing on the screen. "Hello, Flint." Weiss returned the greeting. "Schnee, what can I do you for?" "I just want to make sure, the charity event is tonight, and I want to know if the band is still playing the song I requested. And making sure that my father isn't aware of it," Weiss said. "A little last-minute proofreading, huh? Yeah, I got some friends in that band and I made sure to give them a copy of your song. That was easy to do," Flint said. "Keeping it hidden from the public, particularly your pops and the other elitists. Not so much. Sorry if I gave you any trouble with that," Weiss apologized. "You kidding? I'm down for a challenge. And that song you wrote, oh, that's gonna really light some fire under those rich asses." Flint smirked. "I'd do this all over again in a heartbeat." Who knew you were such a rebel? I had some pretty good influences. Weiss replied. Thanks again, Flint. I owe you for this. See you at the show. Wouldn't miss it. Can't wait to see the looks on all those snobs' faces. He laughed before Weiss hung up. And as she did, she saw the files had finished downloading. Once that was done, Weiss quickly logged off her computer and erased her browser history to make sure nobody could trace it back to her. And just as quickly, Weiss sent all the downloaded files to Tails via her scroll. She hated to leave searching through all those numbers with her friend as he was probably busy helping Ironwood, but it would be safer to have him look through it all at the academy, as opposed to in her own house under Jacques' watchful eye. There was then a knock on her door. Coming. Weiss stood up and opened the door, revealing her faithful butler. Klein. Your outfit for tonight, Miss Schnee. The butler handed her a box with his eyes currently being brown before they turned yellow. And I must say, it is exceptionally beautiful. Especially with your design choice. Thank you, Klein. Weiss smiled as she accepted the box. Also, young Master Whitley has asked for you. Klein revealed, his eyes turning brown. He wants to discuss something with your father and hopes you would help him with that. Weiss was certainly surprised to hear that. Whitley was actually asking her for help. While his snarky attitude has softened up a great deal since the mine collapse, and their relationship has become less hostile towards each other, he still has never directly asked her for help. Why would he do that? Weiss asked. Klein's eyes turned red. I think he's finally realized how much of a prick your father is and is about to tell that to his face. They then turned mint green. And maybe he just wants you with him as emotional support. That is very important for one's own mental health. Weiss wasn't quite sure it was that as Whitley had no reason to turn against their father. But she was at least curious to know what was going on. Alright, let's see what this is about. The butler had led the heiress Jacques' office, where both he and Whitley were waiting. Sister. Whitley greeted with a smile, which surprised Weiss as it wasn't condescending like before. It seemed like he was genuinely happy to see her here. Thank you, Klein. Of course, Master Whitley. Klein bowed before leaving. What is this about? Weiss asked. Whitley had a matter to discuss with me and felt that, for whatever reason, your input would be valuable. Jacques said condescendingly, much to Weiss' irritation. You remember your talk with Robin Hill, Hanlon, and Bran at the mine? Whitley reminded. Just before it all collapsed. Yes. Weiss nodded. Well, the plans never reached father even after things settled down, so I was hoping that we could just deliver it to him in person. Whitley said. As if Weiss wasn't surprised enough. Whitley. They were good plans and, after what happened, I think that maybe they would be necessary to prevent further loss of life. Whitley commented. Before she knew it, Weiss found herself smiling to her younger brother, a notion that seemed to irritate Jacques. And what plans exactly are you referring to? The patriarch questioned seriously. For a long time, there have been many fatalities in our mines. Whitley began. They're dangerous, obviously. And even if we don't take accidents into account, the conditions of the mines alone are something to be concerned about. The low temperatures, potential poisoning with dust. After the collapse, I took the liberty of doing research into the fatalities and accidents that take place in our mines and, they're a lot higher than I assumed. Well, of course. It is a dangerous job. Jacques put in. And somebody has to do it, as we are the biggest supplier of dust in all of Remnant, after all. Quite literally the whole world depends on us. And how much of that is being supplied to a madman with plans of world conquest? Weiss questioned internally, but didn't say anything. And maybe we can't exactly prevent accidents from ever occurring in the mines. I think I know a way that we can keep a steady flow of dust production, as well as drop the fatality rate to near zero. Whitley proposed. I'm listening, Whitley. Jacques allowed him to talk. The idea came from Weiss, as well as the aforementioned people whom she negotiated with, and they seemed to fully support the notion. Whitley continued, making sure that Weiss also received credit, much to her further surprise. As you know, General Ironwood has now supplied the military with the more advanced Atlesian Knight 200s, but that leaves the less advanced 130 models in limbo as to what to do with them. But rather than having them disposed and go to waste, we work with the military in having the 130 units reconfigured into mining drones. Jacques seemed to be paying attention as his son went on. Machines are tireless and efficient and can keep a steady flow on dust mining and production and can be easily repaired if an accident should happen. As for the people in the mines, we have them placed in less dangerous jobs in the company. Like maybe dust transportation, or even security detail. And yes, I know that such jobs would require special training, but we have the money and resources to make it happen. I ran the numbers myself. And with this change, we'd have far less fatalities on our hands and have a much better image on our company for all of Remnant. Isn't that right, Weiss? He looked to his sister with an excited and hopeful smile. Was Whitley really willing to go through with this? She had hoped that maybe their experience in the mines had opened his mind a bit, but she was expecting more of a slow transition with her intent to simply negotiate with the protesters before the collapse. Maybe him seeing all those lives in danger caused something in him to snap. While she was happy to see this change, it also left something of a bitter taste for her brother to have to go through a life or death situation like that to bring such a change in him. Yes, Weiss nodded. I agree wholeheartedly. So, what do you think, father? Whitley looked to Jacques hopefully. The mustached man looked to his son for a moment with a slight smile, only for him to chuckle before looking at his son, who simply blinked in confusion. Wait, are you serious? Weiss glared, while her younger brother seemed stunned. Yes, I'm serious. Did you think I was making some kind of joke? Oh, come now, Whitley. You can't honestly expect me to agree to such a ridiculous proposition. Jacques continued to chuckle. I would understand if it came from your sister, but you. What? Whitley was at a total loss, clearly not expecting this response from Jacques. But, father, I've been to the mines. I've seen how dangerous they are. Do you have any idea how much of a cost it would be for such an overhaul in our company? The man continued. While I can understand your wish to not let resources go to waste, having all those older AK units reconfigured would cost far more than a pretty lean. And even then, the cost of having them maintained and repaired. We have the money though. Whitley tried. I ran the numbers and it's well within our budget. I've been studying this proposition for the past couple of weeks to make sure. And you suggest the idea of bringing those animals higher up into our company? Jacques interrupted. Weiss did her best to suppress her growl, wanting nothing more than to punch him just for that. But father, those are our employees. Whitley went on. And they're putting their lives in danger for us. It's not safe down there. Shouldn't we at least try to? Did you forget what the White Fang has done to us? Jacques interrupted again as he stood up. How much damage they've done to our company. The people we work with that they've killed. If we appease them by letting them into our company, we may as well be bringing their blades to our own throats. But, they're not in the White Fang, Whitley still tried. Not every faunus, I mean, they're our people. Our people. Jacques walked over to his son and stood over him, prompting Weiss to step closer if he tried anything. They're cheap labor that we can use and dispose of like any other resource. I thought that was something you already understood. He could see the confidence and hope that his son had before vanishing from his eyes as he looked surprised and confused. But to think you'd actually listen to such an audacious proposal from the sister who abandoned our family. I'm quite disappointed in you, son. Whitley couldn't quite explain it, but the way his father spoke and loomed over him made him lose whatever strength he had to resist. He never saw his father act this way before, at least not to him. He'd seen his father and Winter get into fights long before she left for the military, and Weiss frequently disagree with him before she left for Beacon, but he always just assumed that it was because they wanted to be Huntresses, to go out into the world and fight grim as opposed to working for the company like he and Jacques wanted. But the way Jacques seemed to brush off a proposal that could potentially save lives and better improve their company's reputation. It seems that maybe we need to rediscuss some matters, Whitley. And that maybe you've been spending far too much time with your sister. Jacques said to him. With all due respect, father. Weiss spoke up. Whitley and I have not spoken much since the collapse at the mines. At least not as far as I can see. Jacques replied. So, from this point forward, you two are to have no further contact with each other unless I say otherwise. Whitley gave an honest gasp at that. But, father. It's for your own good, son. Jacques tried to speak in a tone that seemed caring and concerning, but Weiss could see right through it. Now run along back to your room, Weiss. We need you well rested before the event tonight. As much as Weiss wanted to openly defy him right then and there, as well as grab Whitley and leave this place, she reeled herself in. She had to get the performance done. That was something she needed to do, not necessarily for the mission, but for herself. And maybe it could also help Sonic and the others too. Of course. Weiss nodded. She looked to her brother, who turned towards her with a confused and upset expression, something that made her own look waver. But what solace could she give with their father directly over him? But while she couldn't say anything right now, she could talk to him after the performance. With reluctance, the middle child of the Schnee family stepped out of the office and into the hallway. There she was surprised to see Willow standing just outside with Klein. She made sure the door was closed behind her so her father couldn't see or hear before addressing her other parent. "Mother, I overheard what you, your brother, and your father were talking about," Willow confessed. Weiss looked to Klein in surprise, who gave a nod in confirmation. "A lot of those ideas were really good. Can't say I'm surprised that he didn't approve of them." "I feel the same," Weiss said. "Is there anything I can do for you, Weiss?" Willow asked. "No, there isn't." Weiss turned and proceeded to walk away. "You don't have to do that show, you know," her mother said to her, causing Weiss to stop briefly. "You could just skip it." "I doubt father would approve," Weiss muttered, her back still to her mother. "Well, when has that ever stopped you?" Willow replied with a slight smile. "It's a little late for you to start being concerned for my well-being, mother," Weiss said, causing Willow to look in surprise, while Klein looked a tad nervous in between them. "Shouldn't you be in the garden? I wouldn't want the wine to get lonely without their constant companion." Willow winced at that, but tried to reach out. "Weiss, I was just..." "Maybe you should go, mother," the heiress said coldly, her resentment coming to the surface slightly. "Just leave. It's what you're good at, anyway." That caused Willow to recoil as if she were struck. With a look of shame in her eyes, Willow turned to walk away, leaving Weiss alone in the hallway with her butler. "Weiss," Klein tried to speak. "If you have something to say, Klein, please just say it," Weiss stated, her back still turned. With a sigh and his eyes being brown, Klein spoke. "I realize how absent your mother has been in your life and you were right to be upset with her. But she saw the attack on Beacon and she was beyond terrified for you and your sister." That caused Weiss to turn to him slightly. "And for you and Master Whitley when she heard about the mine collapse." "She heard about that. I would have thought father would silence," Weiss assumed. "Your mother surprisingly has her ways," Klein commented with a small smirk before speaking seriously again. "I am not trying to justify her neglect. As I said, you are within your rights to be disappointed with her. But she does seem to genuinely want to set things right. Even if she did, I doubt father would let it happen," Weiss commented. "Probably not," Klein agreed as his eyes turned red briefly before he sneezed as they turned light blue. "But little snowflake, it wouldn't hurt to, at least give it a chance. She even has tried to limit herself from drinking." Weiss' expression softened somewhat. She knew she was within her rights to be angry at her mother for being neglectful to her and the rest of her siblings. But at the same time, she too suffered under their horrible excuse for a father as he was the primary reason she was driving to alcoholism. But the hurt was still there. Still, if she knew RWBY and Sonic were here, they'd encourage her to give her a chance too. "So, maybe. Perhaps we can talk after the performance," Weiss said. Klein smiled with yellow eyes. "I think that's a splendid idea." Argus. Lionheart had led RWBY, Young, Sonic, Amy, Knuckles, and Rosa to a more secluded park in the city, not too far from the military base as the headmaster of Haven would still be leaving soon, but it was still close enough to the base that the people would be keeping their distance. On their way there Sonic and his friends couldn't help but notice how uneasy people were whenever they came relatively near the military base, not that they could blame them given how that base's previous commander unleashed a giant robot to deal with the Babylon rogues, and that alone made anyone more than a little nervous, not to mention the recent rise in Grimm activity because of that. Lionheart himself said it was a miracle that a Leviathan Grimm hadn't risen from the sea because of that, and given what Sonic had heard regarding this enormous type of Grimm, he'd have to agree as something like that would definitely cause a lot of trouble. But the group would soon arrive near a fountain with a series of benches around it. Lionheart sat on one across from RWBY and Yang while Rosa hung close to the former, while Sonic, Knuckles, and Amy kept their distance as this sounded like it would be a more personal and private discussion. "You want to know about your mother, RWBY?" Lionheart asked. "You knew her, right?" RWBY responded with a question of her own. "She was just as involved in the fight against Salem as you and Ozpin, wasn't she?" "Yes, she was," Lionheart confirmed. "So, I did know her for many years. But why would you want to ask me when you could be calling your father Akiro?" Yang looked away slightly at the mention of those two before RWBY gave her answer. "Dad and Uncle Kiro always talk about Summer Rose being the best huntress in the world, saying how she was unstoppable, or something like being justice incarnate." "I don't think they ever said stuff like that," Yang said to her sister. "But yeah, they always did speak highly of her. But, I just want to know if there were ever any moments where she wasn't a great huntress." RWBY wondered, which only seemed to confuse Yang and Lionheart. "I'm afraid I don't understand," the Lion Faunus said. "Like were there moments where she failed?" RWBY clarified but spoke in a somewhat shy and uncertain tone. "Where she messed up. Moments where she felt conflicted or ever had any doubts. I don't think I can ask Dad or Uncle Kiro this because they loved her and I'm not sure they'd want to answer something like this." Yang and Amy looked especially concerned at the way RWBY phrased that, with Rosa only looking in confusion as Sonic and Knuckles looked to one another with similar expressions. "I see," Lionheart seemed to get it. "Let me say for the record though, that just because someone fails, it does not mean that they are a bad huntsman or huntress. Many great heroes have failed more than once, myself included. Even Ozpin, who failed more than any of us. So, there were times that she failed," RWBY said. "Yes, there were," Lionheart confirmed. "How'd she handle it?" RWBY asked. "Well, it usually depends on the specific situation," the headmaster of Haven tried to explain. "But in most circumstances, Summer tried to keep a positive attitude for those around her, despite any times they've failed. Kept trying to look for the positive result that came about it, like the number of people they saved compared to any they may have lost." "What about a moment where there weren't any positives?" RWBY asked. "It was just complete and total failure no matter how you looked at it." "Young RWBY, what are you even? Just, please answer it," RWBY insisted, much to the further concern of her sister and her friends. This wasn't at all how RWBY would normally act. The way Lionheart described Summer sounded very similar to how they knew RWBY, someone who tried to see the bright side of things regardless. Yang and Sonic in particular knew how much RWBY looked up to her birth mother and felt inspired by her. But now, she was actively looking for a moment where Summer Rose completely and totally failed. Was RWBY feeling like that maybe she failed or something? Lionheart's expression wavered as one memory came to mind. There was one particular moment that was really bad. "Did your father or Kiro ever mention the name Gretchen Reinhardt?" RWBY and Yang both looked to each other before the later gave the answer. "No, it doesn't sound familiar. Gretchen was a student from Beacon, enrolled the same time as your parents." Lionheart began to explain to the girls, with their extraterrestrial friends listening closely. Like Summer, Gretchen was the leader of her own team, Team GRVE. They and Team STRQ came out of the entrance exam together and were close to each other. Despite being on separate teams, they acted almost like one team of 8 together. "That sounds familiar," Yang commented as this reminded her of when Team RWBY and Team JNPR both finished their entrance exam at Beacon and had been close since. Gretchen and Summer were close friends too, being leaders of their respective teams. Lionheart continued. Whenever one of them was having trouble, the other would step in to help. They had a good dynamic. "What happened?" RWBY asked, feeling like something bad must have happened between them. The Lion Faunus gave a sigh before he answered. During their second year, Teams STRQ and GRVE came to Haven for an exchange program. There was an influx in grim activity in the region and most professional huntsmen in the area had to clear it out. One village was on the verge of being overrun, so Summer and Gretchen both volunteered their teams to help with the evacuation. But, the incoming horde of Grim was larger than we could have expected. All the professional huntsmen were already spread thin across the kingdom so they couldn't get any backup. Both teams were about to be overwhelmed, but Gretchen and her team stayed behind to buy Team STRQ and the survivors time to escape. Summer wanted to stay to make sure they all made it out, but Gretchen knocked her out and handed her to Raven, telling her to flee. Team STRQ returned to Haven alive, but Team GRVE, they didn't make it. Sonic and Amy's eyes all widened in shock and surprise, while Knuckles held his head down in mourning. Young too felt her own eyes become circular at this, but also found herself looking to RWBY, whose own face had turned pale. Rosa could immediately sense RWBY's distress and tried to nuzzle against her face, but RWBY didn't seem to notice as she only paid attention to the story being told. The aftermath of that was disastrous. Lionheart went on. The villagers were saved, but 4 noble souls were lost, friends, before they even became professional huntsmen. How'd they take it? Yang questioned shakily. Not great. Lionheart shook his head. They lost their friends whom they'd known since coming to Beacon and shared memories together. But Summer, she tried to keep a positive attitude about it all, like that their sacrifices weren't in vain. But that's when Raven slapped her across the face. RWBY and Yang both gasped at that. Raven, in a morning fury, accused Summer about not caring about her own best friend. Said that she seemed to value the lives of strangers more than the people she actually knew. Kiro tried to defend Summer and Tai tried to ease the situation between the two. Honestly, I almost felt the team would fall apart during that whole argument. And the whole time, Summer tried to keep a smile, but it wasn't until later at night, when she was alone, or she felt she was alone, that I caught the sight of her in a courtyard, bawling her eyes out. RWBY could only imagine what her mother must have gone through, to lose a best friend like that. Actually, RWBY knew exactly what that was like. Her mind flashed back to the Battle of Beacon, where Metal Sonic used her Crescent Rose to tear Penny apart. She cried alone. Yang questioned in disbelief. She couldn't cry to her teammates. Her friends. Her soon-to-be family. Perhaps she felt that she couldn't. Lionheart assumed. This is only my guess, but as the leader, Summer likely felt that she had to be the strongest, emotionally anyway. Set the best example for those around her, at the cost of herself it would seem. When they would return to Beacon, I told Ozpin what I saw, and I had hoped he would help resolve the situation. Did he? Yang questioned. I do not know. Lionheart replied, much to the sisters' confusion. After they left, I had to resume my own responsibilities with the students at Haven. I didn't have the chance to reach out to them again until they graduated from Beacon. Since the team was still together, I assumed they worked things out. Yang scoffed. Given how Raven left, probably not. Perhaps not. Lionheart looked in mourning before looking at RWBY. The girl looked so upset and emotionally confused over all this, not that he could blame her. But, perhaps, that can save her. RWBY, he got her attention. Perhaps you and your sister should return to Vale. The girl gasped at that. There's no need for you to risk yourself any further. He continued. Vale is free of the Grim, Salem has no presence there. And I've been in contact with Goodwitch to know that Beacon is well on its way to its former glory. You'd be safe there. But, I can't just leave. RWBY shakily argued. This is what we signed on for. What I signed on for. You haven't signed on for anything. Lionheart replied. You're not a huntress, RWBY. You're only a student. Technically a dropout. But I can fight. My eyes can. RWBY, listen to me. Lionheart shouted as he stood up from his bench. RWBY backed away with a slight whimper, prompting Yang to jump to her feet and stand protectively in front of her sister, while Sonic and his friends stepped in as well, staying right behind the girl with Rosa sticking close. The headmaster of Haven winced before calming himself down. He was trying to get through to the girl, not terrorize her. I don't deny that you are a skilled fighter, and you have silver eyes, which does make you indeed special. He spoke calmly. But you're still so young, even by first-year student standards. I've seen professional and hardened huntsmen lose their lives in this kind of work. And you're not just involved in professional work, but a secret war against what should be for all accounts the ultimate evil of our world. He looked to Sonic. You say you have battled threats like that before and always won, right? Why, yes, I have. Sonic nodded. We have. He gestured to Knuckles and Amy. Then you can do this on your own. Lionheart said before looking to RWBY. Go to Vale, take your sister, and be with your father. You'll be safe there. I can't do that, RWBY exclaimed before even Yang could protest. My teammates are out there risking their lives. What kind of leader would I be if I abandoned them like that? If that's how you feel, then work with Goodwitch at Beacon. Lionheart suggested. You can communicate with your teammates long distance. This way you can still contribute and be safe. I'm not supposed to be kept safe. I'm supposed to be keeping Remnant safe. RWBY shouted, which caused Young, Sonic, and their friends to look at her with surprise and concern. That's what I am. I'm a leader. I'm a huntress with silver eyes like Mom. I can't quit. Hey. Young put a firm hand on her sister's shoulder. Why don't we take a minute to cool off, okay? RWBY looked ready to protest, but when she tried to pull free, Yang's grip only tightened. The blonde narrowed her eyes, silently telling RWBY that this wasn't up for discussion. Looking around her slightly, RWBY saw the looks of concern from Sonic, Amy, even Knuckles, and especially Rosa, who was shaking slightly. This caused RWBY's look to soften somewhat before conceding. Fine. She was led away by her sister with everyone else following. Sonic. Lionheart got his attention as the rest of the group left. I have to return to Haven, I've been away for too long. But please, take what I said into account. RWBY is not safe out here. Having those eyes put such a target on her back that Salem will do anything and everything to get her. I've met other people with silver eyes, many were strong and mighty warriors, but every single one of them met their end at the hands of that monster, and RWBY will join them if they cross paths. Please, I don't want to see someone so young and full of potential die. Not again. Again? Sonic questioned. Lionheart looked away somewhat before replying. Please, do it. With that, he turned around to return to the military base to leave for Haven, leaving the blue hedgehog alone as he considered everything he just heard. RWBY really wasn't doing well. And it wasn't just now. Looking back on it, Sonic could see that RWBY's spirit was slowly dwindling ever since they left Patch. He had a feeling things wouldn't be easy given what happened at Beacon, not to mention the fallout with her family and Ozpin's group, but he had hoped that maybe she could bounce back, especially with Tails helping to rebuild Penny. But that didn't seem to be the case. Thinking back on that fallout made him think to how angry Kiro in particular was with Sonic and his friends for getting his nieces involved in all this, and that story Lionheart talked about with their friends dying really put a lot of that into context, as did the reminder of Summer's own passing. Perhaps Kiro was right and Sonic should have kept RWBY away from all this. And if that was the case, then maybe it would be better for RWBY if she did return to Vale. Spiral Hill. Amelia's car had been taken to an auto shop within Tangle's hometown, where the present mechanics, along with Nolan, looked it over with the woman waiting on the side with Scarlet, Sage, and Neptune right outside. What do you think, kid? The burly male rabbit who was the shop owner asked. I'm still getting used to all this dust stuff. Like I said, we should have this fixed in a couple days. No problem, Nolan said. Appreciate the help. Amelia smiled. Didn't know huntsmen were mechanics too. I grew up in Vacuo. Nolan explained. Gotta know how the engines work just in case your vehicle gets stuck in the middle of nowhere. Amelia looked confused. A little far away from the desert then, don't ya think? Nolan looked away slightly. Mateen died. Amelia's eyes widened at that while the rest of his teammates looked to him in sympathy, particularly Scarlet. It was at the Battle of Beacon. I'm sorry, I didn't know, the woman said. It's okay. Nolan tried to put on a strong look on his face, but Amelia could see right through it. I lost my brother and sister-in-law years ago myself, she said, surprising everyone present. No matter how long it is, when you lose someone important to you, that always sticks with you. She put a hand on the young man's shoulder. So, trust me, I get it too. Nolan gave an appreciative smile before turning around to get to work on the engine. Changing the subject a bit, what are a couple of students like you doing out this far from Haven? Amelia asked the rest of Team SSNN. I get that all the pros were called back to the main city and all, but technically, we're not supposed to be here. Scarlet answered. Huntsman students are forbidden from leaving the academies under the council's orders. Yeah, we just came here to help cause some friends asked us to. Neptune said. The friend of a friend, type deal. Also, cause it was the right thing to do because there's nobody else to protect this place from a grim attack. Sage added. What about that Tangle girl? Emilia asked. She seems tough. Oh, she can definitely take the Grim to town. Neptune smiled. But she's the only fighter in this place, and it wouldn't hurt to have someone watching your back. Okay, makes sense. Amelia nodded. By the way, where's Oscar? He went with the aforementioned lemur to her friend's museum about asking for a favor. Scarlet replied. Wow, this is a nice-looking museum, Oscar said with a smile as he looked around the mineral museum. Indeed, Ozpin added internally. You can tell a great deal of effort was put into assembling all of this. Thank you, young man, Jules said from her desk. I realize it's not nearly as big as those you'd see in cities, but I'm still rather proud with how it all turned out. So, Oscar is it? Tangle hung upside down via her tail attached to the railing on the second floor, appearing in front of the young farmhand's face, causing the boy to give a startled yelp as he fell on his back. Wop, sorry about that. She lowered herself down and offered him a hand. You said you wanted to ask for a favor. Yeah, do you know a blue hedgehog named Sonic? Oscar asked somewhat nervously. Oh yeah, we know him. He was in our town a couple weeks ago. Tangle answered, surprising Oscar as well as Ozpin. He's in Mistral, Oscar questioned. Yep, busy trying to find the Chaos Emeralds and help stop some crazy witch lady named Salem. Tangle said casually. Oscar blinked while Ozpin, if he had his own body again, would likely choke and spit out all the coffee he would normally be drinking. Tangle, Sonic said that the rest of Remnant was not supposed to know about that Salem character. Jewel lightly scolded. Whoops, my bad. The lemur chuckled nervously. I kinda already know, Oscar revealed, much to the surprise and confusion of Tangle and Jewel. And that's the reason I'm hoping to ask Sonic for help. See, something happened recently and I was told that Sonic and the power he uses could help me with it. What happened? Tangle asked. That Salem lady or Eggman hunting you down or something. Or something, it's complicated. Oscar brushed his hands together nervously as he rapidly tapped his foot. Jewel could see the anxiety the poor boy was experiencing and gently rolled out her chair from her desk. Here, perhaps you should sit down, she offered. Thanks, Oscar did sit down. May I get you some tea? It always helps me when my nerves are rattled. Jewel offered again. That actually sounds nice. Thank you, Oscar accepted. As Jewel went to the back to fetch the tea, Tangle saw how nervous Oscar still was. So, I know you said your little problem is complicated, and that Sonic can get you out of it, but if there's anything I can do to help. Have you ever been just thrown into a huge mess and have your whole life turned upside down before? He asked. Well, having my own hometown zapped to a different dimension is certainly different from my average Tuesday. Tangle commented with a slight smile for the sake of humor. But, yeah, there have been times where things didn't go the way I want to. I think my situation is a little bit different. Oscar commented. My whole life has been changed and I never wanted it to. I was happy with where I was. But, now I have to leave the only home I knew because of all the rise in grim activity, and now, this. He gestured to himself. This is all just happening too much at once and, I'm scared. I'm scared cause there's no guarantee I'm even making out of it all. My aunt and I might have died if it weren't for you. But what if that's just the start of all this? I'm scared, terrified, and I don't know what to do. He put his hands to his face in frustration and fear. From deep within, Ozpin's heart went out to his current host. No matter how many times this has happened, he's never gotten used to it. Many of the souls he reincarnated into have had similar reactions, sometimes even worse where they have full-blown mental breakdowns. Only a select few were quick to accept it, but that clearly wasn't the case for Oscar. Just an ordinary farm boy who was content with his current life was now getting thrown into a war that could decide the fate of the planet. Once again, he cursed the Brother of Light who put this curse on his first life, and he cursed said life for accepting it to begin with. Tangle looked to the boy in pity as she went over to him and put a hand on his back. I know we only just met, and I can get you're scared, but you're not facing it alone at least. You got your aunt with you, and now you got me. Oscar looked to the lemur in shock at that. They literally just met and yet she was already considering him a friend. How are you so calm right now? Oscar questioned. You know about Salem, creatures of Grimm could attack your home at any minute. You have no idea what's going to happen next, but you're excited for it. The way I see it, it's a new adventure. Tangle smiled. Sure, I'll admit it's a bit more than what I'm used to. Maybe things can't go exactly back to how they used to be, but that doesn't mean what'll happen next won't be good. Things change. So rather than be afraid of all the bad stuff that could happen, I try to keep an open mind and think about what I can do with what I got. And I got my best friend and my home with me right now. I even got Sonic on speed dial if things get too hectic. Sometimes, when we're faced with the unknown, you just gotta take a leap of faith. She offered Oscar her hand. Whatever kind of problems you got, Oscar, I promise to have your back as we work through them. You don't have to be alone in this. So, what do you say? It'll be less scary to take that leap with a friend. Oscar was at a loss for words. Better say, yes, Oscar. Jewel chimed in as she flew back into the main room with a cup of tea in her hand. She'll follow you even if you tell her no. But seriously, if Tangle is offering to help, then you can count on me too. She offered him the tea, which he shakily took. He looked at his own reflection in the tea for a moment before Ozpin's voice rang in his head. They have a point. Oscar, I know you didn't ask for this, and I am so sorry that my presence has essentially thrown your life into disarray. But, believe me when I say, having friends by your side will certainly make things easier. And they seem like decent and caring people. I believe you can trust them. As much as he hated having a literal ghost in his head giving him advice, a part of him felt like maybe it would be best to at least hear it out. And Ozpin did have a point. Tangle and Jewel were kind enough to give him and his aunt shelter, and even offered shoulders for him to lean on in this crisis he was experiencing. He loved his Aunt Amelia and he knew she would be by his side the entire time, but perhaps having more people with him could help. Okay, Oscar nodded as he took a sip of the tea. Oh, wow. This is good. It's my own personal mix. Glad you like it. Jewel smiled. The two were then pulled into a hug by Tangle's own tail. Welcome to the bestie club, Oscar. She said enthusiastically, in which Jewel was unsurprised at her affection while Oscar blushed slightly. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over them as something big passed over the windows at the front of the shop, much to the trio's concern. Huh, what's that about? Tangle wondered aloud. The three stepped outside where other residents of Spiral Hill, including Team SSSN and Amelia, had gathered in the town square to see a mistrial dropship lowering itself towards the ground. The people cleared so that the craft could land. Jewel, did you call Sonic and RWBY already? Tangle asked in confusion. No, and even if I had, Sonic would have just ran here, wouldn't he? Jewel replied. Oscar, be on your guard. Ozpin advised internally. I have a bad feeling about this. The boy looked to his aunt, who then turned to see the concerned expression on his own face, causing her to look a bit worried too as she reached for her shotgun. Once the ship landed, the door on the side opened up as who appeared to be Professor Lionheart and Earl Shen both stepped out, with Team SSNN looking especially surprised. Can the students who have been watching over this village please step forward? Lionheart requested. That would be us, Professor. Scarlet said as he, Nola, Neptune, and Sage stepped out of the crowd and approached the pair. Is something wrong, sir? Sage asked. No, nothing at all. Lionheart replied with a smile. In fact, we're here to relieve you of your duties. This seemed to surprise the team of students, as well as their friends. You children have done exceptionally well in protecting this village, but now the time has come to return to the academy. But do not worry, Earl Shen here will take your place in watching over this village. Most impressive indeed for students. Shen added as he addressed the students. Thank you for your efforts, I will take it from here. Oh, well, thanks. Neptune said in minor surprise and confusion, with the rest of his teams feeling uncertain. Please, step inside and the pilot will fly you back to Haven. Lionheart requested as he motioned for the quartet to enter the seemingly empty ship, which they did. What about you, sir? Nolan asked. I'll be right behind you, don't worry. Lionheart assured. Though still uncertain, the members of Team SSNN stepped into the ship. Something's not right, Ozpin said to Oscar. What are you? I know Leo, and it's unlike him to leave the academy unless absolutely necessary. Ozpin said. Even if it's just to pick up his students, Oscar muttered. I have no doubt he would. But in a time of uncertainty like this, with the possibility of an attack on Haven being real, he would have stayed at the academy and sent one of his instructors to pick up the students. Ozpin said. Earl Shen is a huntsman of Mistral, yes. But he's not a teacher. This isn't right. Oscar wanted to hope that Ozpin was simply being paranoid, but he was starting to see what he meant by that. He couldn't quite explain it, but he was starting to feel the same sort of way as him. Hey, hold on. Oscar tried to step forward, but the second team SSNN stepped into the ship. All the doors closed, much to the alarm of the villagers. Wah, what's going on? Neptune questioned as he and the rest of his teammates were now stuck inside the ship. Which wasn't as empty as they thought, as pink glass-like energy dissipated around the interior to reveal Neapolitan, Vermilion, and Tyrian. Try not to kill them. The boar-masked man said as he cracked his knuckles. They could have useful semblances. Well, that's a bit less fun, but doable. Tyrian cackled as he brandished his scorpion tail and leapt at the shocked student team. The sounds of screams and violence came from within the ship, startling all the villagers, as well as Oscar and Amelia, as Tangle quickly stepped forward. Hey, the heck is going on? Sorry. Lionheart smirked as his eyes changed to pale white with black sclera, and the same sort of pink glass-like illusion dropped from outside the ship, revealing Rough, Tumble, and Metal Sonic all on top. This village is under our control now. Resist at your own peril. Shen drew his spear as the armed Rough and Tumble dropped by their sides and Metal Sonic hovered above them all. Metal drew his new weapon with magnetic attachments to his hands, a pair of dual scythe blades attached to the back of his hands, as did the modified gun configurations that revealed a set of energized blasters in his palms and aimed them at the shocked crowd. Ozpin recognized not only the robot that ended his previous life, but also the weapon that belonged to one of his students and had been heavily modified and altered. Oh dear, Atlas. It was evening time, the sun slowly setting over the Schnee manor as Klein led Weiss down the stairs into the main lobby of the mansion, where her father and brother all waited for her. The former had a condescending smirk on his face while the latter seemed rather down. Weiss saw this and wanted to say something but bit her tongue as her father was right there. Where is your dress, Weiss? Jacques asked expectantly. Right here. Weiss held the box and showed him the bright white gown within. I'd prefer to get changed at the venue so that if anything were to happen it wouldn't get dirty. If we leave now, we'll have ample time. Smart move. Jacques complimented. Shall we then? Weiss and Klein exchanged brief eye contact as the latter gave a subtle nod before Weiss let go and she followed her brother and father outside to the awaiting limo. Meanwhile, up the stairs on the left wing, just around the corner, Willow had seen it all with a guilty expression. She'd known her husband long enough to know that this so-called charity event was really just a way to promote himself and their daughter was merely the face for it, nothing more. But she knew there wasn't anything she could do, not without serious repercussions that Jacques would be more than willing to bring down on her and her remaining 2 children. To be honest, Weiss should not have come back. She wasn't happy in this cold mansion. She was glad that both Weiss and Winter had left to pursue their respective dreams, and she hoped that maybe Klein could talk to Whitley a bit and he could find a way to leave too. These past couple of weeks, after that horrible accident at the mines, Whitley seemed willing to spread his wings a little bit. He even has been calling to some other friends that he apparently made recently. She never met them, personally, but she heard the names, Silver, and May, when she passed by and overheard their conversations via scroll. But who was she kidding? Jacques would never allow favorite child to leave, and the only one who seemed willing to stay by his side and try to see some good in the man that she herself gave up on years ago. The mother of the Schnee family walked down the halls and happened to pass by a large portrait on the wall. One that had her husband, and all her children painted on it, and none of them were smiling. Throughout the years, that picture had always been cold, but more recently, it just seemed far colder. When did this family become nothing more than a cage? Before the woman could ponder further, a bright orange glow appeared directly underneath her. Willow gave a startled yelp as she suddenly fell into what seemed like a portal, which closed the second she fell through. Argus. Moving a bit further away from the basin deeper into the park, Ruby followed her sister and friends until they stopped at a certain point. She looked at all of them and saw how concerned looks on all of their faces, with even Rosa looking especially worried. What? She questioned. Ruby, are you okay? Yang asked. I'm fine. Ruby grumbled. You don't sound fine, Amy observed. So, maybe I'm just in a bad mood. RWBY tried to dismiss. Why though? Something happened, Sonic asked. I'm just in a mood. It happens to people, RWBY stated firmly. A bad mood to ask something about your mom? Knuckles questioned. What's wrong with me asking something like that? RWBY began to lose her composure. Nothing. But, I've never heard you ask about about Summer failing before. Yang said. Why aren't you calling her, Mom, anymore? RWBY asked Yang, to her confusion. Ever since we left home, you've always been calling her by her name, when you've called her Mom almost all the time before, even after you found out about Raven. I get that she's not your birth mother, but did something change? RWBY, you're trying to change the subject. Yang said, but her sister interrupted her again. And I know you're going through a hard time ever since the stunt Raven pulled here a couple weeks ago. She continued. How about we talk about that, right now? Hey, how's about we talk about you and you trying to deflect on me like that? Yang exclaimed as she marched towards her sister, but RWBY marched forward to meet her. Like how you deflect all the blame for what happened at Beacon on Kiro. RWBY exclaimed. Really? This again? Yang yelled as her hair glowed and her eyes turned red. Okay. Break it up. Sonic quickly got in between them with Knuckles pulling Yang back and Amy doing the same for RWBY while Rosa hung back cautiously. RWBY, hey, love ya kiddo, but we gotta talk about this. You too, Sonic, she questioned. No, he's right, RWBY. Amy insisted as she let her go. Ever since we got to Mistral, your mood just keeps dropping, and it's especially gotten worse since we arrived at Argus. RWBY, you also yelled to that Sienna lady when you first met. Rosa put in, but RWBY turned to glare at her, causing the little wisp to yelp before hiding behind Sonic. Seeing the tiny and adorable creature shake in fear at her caused RWBY's eyes to widen as her anger slowly dropped. I'm sorry Rosa, Yang, Sonic, everyone I don't know what's gotten into me. She put one hand to her face as she tried to collect her thoughts. Maybe I'm upset with Kiro being gone, and I get why you're angry at him, Yang. I don't blame you. But, maybe I miss him, and our other friends too. Everyone's scattered all across the world, and I know we can call them up anytime but, it's not the same. It feels like Team RWBY fell apart. And, I don't know, maybe it's my fault. Your fault? Sonic questioned as he and especially Yang questioned in surprise. RWBY, we all came up with the plan to split up. It wasn't just you making the choice for us. Yang reminded. But, I'm the leader. Everything that happens to Team RWBY, good and bad, is my responsibility, right? RWBY argued. Just because you are the leader doesn't mean that everything potentially bad that happens is solely your fault. Knuckles put in. Bad things are going to happen regardless, we can't control that no matter how much we want to. And it's not just you and your team, all of us are in on this. Amy gestured all around her. Team Sonic, Team Dark, Team JNPR, and all our other friends that are in on this. We are not your responsibility and you shouldn't have to feel bad for anything that's not your own fault. Penny getting torn apart was my fault. RWBY exclaimed, which caused everyone to look in shock. Metal Sonic ripped her to pieces using Crescent Rose. My weapon that I built with my own 2 hands. Metal did that, RWBY. Sonic stated. And you were locked up on Eggman's ship. You couldn't have done anything. But all that happened because I went after Eggman. RWBY continued as her frustration started to reach the surface. Weiss' sister even tried to stop me from going. I went up there because I thought I could help, but all I did was make things worse. Eggman caught me, Metal Sonic used my Crescent Rose to cut my friend to pieces, I was even too slow to save Ozpin. RWBY couldn't even find the words to finish her sentence as she put both her hands on her face. Sonic, Yang, Amy, and Knuckles all looked to RWBY with concern and sympathy, with Rosa instinctively flying out to nuzzle herself to RWBY's face to try and give what comfort she could. But strangely, RWBY didn't feel any of that as she did before. She thought she did as Penelope advised earlier, talk with her friends, and yet, despite getting as much as she could out, she actually felt worse. That's when the blue hedgehog thought back to what Lionheart said before putting his 2 cents in. RWBY, maybe you should go back to Vale. The girl gasped at that. Sonic, look, Nothing personal, RWBY, but you don't seem like you're in the right headspace right now. Sonic said before quickly raising his hands. I'm not saying you should quit or that we're kicking you out, but that you should take a break. Just spend a week or two in a safe place, maybe talk to your dad. Just a quick vacation, that's all. But Salem, and the emeralds, she tried. RWBY, you remember how Blake was restless, looking for the Eggman and the White Fang back at Beacon? Knuckles reminded. Even you saw she was running herself ragged and suggested she'd take a break. Perhaps you should take your own advice. We can handle things while you're gone. Amy put in with a smile. You might be the leader of your team, but you're still a person and everyone needs to take a break once in a while. And, if you really want to, you can call Kiro and talk to him, Yang said shakily, much to RWBY's surprise. What's going on between us is just that, just between us. If you want to talk to him and make amends, I promise I won't get in your way. And, I think Dad would be happy to see you too. RWBY wasn't sure how to take all this. Return to Vale. Take a break with so much at stake right now. RWBY, even us wisps have our limits, and we're made of living energy. Rosa put in. If we give off too much of our own power, it becomes bad for us and we end up drained. Same could be said for you. Maybe you're just giving off too much energy and need some time to recover. Honestly, the idea of taking a respite sounded good to her, and she would love the idea of trying to repair the bridge between her and Kiro. The only reason she didn't was because she was worried that would upset Yang too much and she wanted both of them to talk to him and sort things out. But Yang still had her own issues to work things out apparently, so maybe it could be just her and Kiro, at least for now. And maybe, she could rest for a little. No, you can't do that. Her own voice rang in her head. You can't take a break right now. You have silver eyes, the only power that could potentially hurt Salem. If something happens to Sonic, you're the only one who can stand against her now. It all depends on you. Remnant depends on you. You have to be better than him. Better than Mom even. Be the Huntress. RWBY felt the back of her neck as she felt the same kind of crick as before, and now it was getting much worse. Something wrong with your neck? Knuckles questioned upon seeing the girl's actions. RWBY blinked in surprise. Just a little crick, I'm fine, Suddenly, Sonic's scroll sounded off, prompting him to answer it and halt their discussion. Hello. Sonic, it's Tangle. There's a whole bunch of Grimm at Spiral Hill. We need help, now. Get here as soon as you can and bring everyone. Wait, Tangle, what are you? Just get here now. We can't hold out much longer. Her voice sounded in distress on the other line before the call ended right there. What's going on? Yang questioned. Spiral Hill's getting hit by Grimm. Sonic answered. Sounds bigger than what Tangle and the others there can handle. Then we better go help, right? RWBY said. RWBY, Amy tried to say something. Innocent lives are at stake. Our own friends, even. The red-clad girl argued. Look, maybe I do have some stuff to sort out, but I can still fight. Look, we don't have time to argue, so let's go help Tangle, Neptune, and everyone right now. And I promise that when it's over, I'll try and work it all out. Okay. Everyone exchanged looks with each other. But as concerned as they were for RWBY, they knew she was right in the fact that this was a major emergency. With that in mind, they all came to an agreement. Alright, but if it's that bad, then we should get there as soon as possible. Sonic. Knuckles looked towards his friend. Yeah, I get it. The blue hedgehog took out the same colored Chaos Emerald. Let me come too. If one of you needs some extra power, I can provide it. Rosa offered. Okay. Sonic accepted. Everyone, get close. The group consisting of RWBY, Yang, Knuckles, Amy, and Rosa circled around Sonic as he held the blue Chaos Emerald straight up. Chaos control. With that, a bright flash of light enveloped all 6 of them before they disappeared from the park and the city of Argus entirely. Meanwhile, Olive Harper sat down in her new office, which previously belonged to the late Caroline Cordovan. The 2 identical guards who had previously followed their late commanding officer stood from across her desk. Welcome to your new quarters. One guard said in a straightforward tone. Is there anything we can do for you? The second guard asked in the same manner. Not at the moment, thank you. You're both dismissed. Harper nodded. Yes ma'am. They both turned around and marched dramatically out of the office, closing the door behind them. After waiting a few moments, and making sure she was alone, Harper took out her scroll and called a certain number. I'm in. Argus is mine now. Good work, Olive. Bram Thornmain said on the other line. Keep it up over there and await further instruction. Bram, are you sure we're doing the right thing? Harper asked with concern. That Starline aside, a lot of people are going to get dragged into this. Ironwood's letting Atlas fall to ruin, and don't even get me started on how Mantle and the other villages are suffering because of him. Bram told her. I don't trust Starline either, but if he can help us get rid of that tyrant, then we need every resource we can get. And how do we know he won't betray us when we're no longer useful? Harper questioned. I have a plan, don't worry. Just keep things under control over there. I'll contact you when I need you. Bram instructed. Okay, Bram, wish us luck. I feel like we'll need it. Harper said as she hung up. She gave a concerned sigh as she looked to her own reflection on the scroll screen. This is for the good of Atlas. And this is the end of part 22 of this What If. I hope you guys like it. Don't really leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.